Hello and welcome to The Sharpening. I am your host, Josh Peck. We have a wonderful guest for you tonight, someone I have had the honor of getting to know for quite some time now. She quickly became one of my best online friends and always proves to be a constant source of great advice, ceaseless prayer, and heartfelt encouragement. Apart from her awesome personal attributes, she is also the brain behind the very successful website extraordinaryintelligence.com and host of the Beyond Extraordinary podcast, both of which deals with topics of high strangeness and quirky curiosities, even exploring the supernatural and conspiracy realms, all through a biblical worldview. She is also the artistic genius behind Extraordinary Boutique, which offers the most stunning and beautiful handmade jewelry and accessories I personally have ever seen. She also has had experience in and coming out of the New Age, which, as regular listeners of this show are already aware, is something her and I have in common. This is why we have decided to make that the topic of tonight's show. All of that being said, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome to the show Natalina of Extraordinary Intelligence. Natalina, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me, Josh. I'm really excited.
I'm really excited too. Thank you so much for coming on. So I was looking back in our Facebook correspondence, and you wanna know something funny?
What?
A week ago, I didn't realize till today, but a week ago we had passed the 1-year anniversary of when I first contacted you. It was November 15th of 2013. I had been contacted by the people over at The Edge with Daniel Ott.
Yeah.
To come on that show, and I'd never heard of it. But I saw how many listeners and viewers that they had, and at that time that made me nervous. So yeah. I saw your picture on the website, and I thought, oh, I think I have her on my friends list. I should write her. So I wrote you, and you gave me a lot of really good encouragement and everything. And then shortly after that, on November 29th of 2013, that was the first time I invited you to be on the show. And here we are a year later.
That is pretty much par for the course Natalina style.
Well, it was good. I made it my monthly routine to keep inviting you and wearing you down, because I heard you on Canary Cry, and I was so impressed by your testimony, and there's so much that I could relate to, and I mean, I'm not even ashamed to admit it. I even teared up a little bit because it hit me. And I just thought, man, I gotta have this person on my show, and so I made it a monthly thing. Hey, if you're not busy, come on The Sharpening. And you finally gave in.
Oh, you wore me down, man.
Well, that's what I do best. It took me what, 3 or 4 years to get my wife, well, who's my wife now, but when I knew her, it took me 3 or 4 years to finally get her to date me. So so that's what I do. I can wear people down.
So for the listeners out there, persistence is key.
Amen.
Well, the funny thing is, Josh, I think the first time you contacted me was shortly after I had done like this big series of interviews on different people's shows. I guess I just blipped onto a lot of people's radars at the same time. And so I had been doing all of these different interviews. And I think what happened was right when you first contacted me, I was just so burnt out from interviews. And so I was just like, oh yeah, maybe next month or something. And it wasn't anything like I thought, well, if you really want to interview me, you're just going to have to wait. It wasn't anything like that. I think it was a combination of the fact that I was still so kind of nervous about the whole being interviewed thing, because that was kind of new to me. Oh, and yeah. Then also the fact that I had just kind of started my own show. And so I was trying to navigate my way through that, and for whatever reason it just never happened. So ideally, the Natalina a year after you first asked her to be on your show is a lot more entertaining than she would have been if she would have been able to do it right away. Let's just
yeah, absolutely. And I never took any offense or anything. I completely understand. And it's all in God's perfect timing. And I really do think this is the perfect time, because this is when it happened. This is when God opened the door for both of us.
Right.
So, and for the listeners who are just now tuning into this is actually like what, our third or fourth hour of talking now.
It is. I think. We yeah, a couple of hours ago at least we started.
Yeah, it was 2:30. It's 5:30 now. So yeah,
Mhm.
wow. Time flies. So we've been talking for a while, which is great. I always like to try to have a little conversation before the show, and 3 hours is fine.
That's just a little bit of, I think both of you and I have something in common, and that is that we're good at talking.
Yes.
There's no shortage of words with us. So.
That's true. Absolutely. Oh, that is awesome. So you honestly have one of the most powerful testimonies I've ever heard. And for those who may not be familiar with you, well, shame on them. I'm kidding. No, but for those who may not be familiar with you, would you be able to share your testimony here?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. It's really special to be able to share this story, because it is something that is it obviously profoundly changed my entire life, and that's true, of course, with everyone's testimony. But I was someone who, I guess, I was raised Christian, and I'm doing air quotes right now because it's like I went to church, I did all the things that you're supposed to do. I went through what's the word I'm looking for? I went through like confirmation classes, and I did the communion, first communion, all of that, like a good Christian little Lutheran girl is supposed to do. And I kind of just went through the motions in my early life, and even as a young adult, I was still very involved in the church. I taught Sunday school, things like that. Interestingly, when I look back on teaching Sunday school, maybe around 19 years old, to little children, I was teaching them the Bible stories as, based off of just the curriculum that they give you to do, but I don't really think I believed in God as I was teaching children about God, which is really kind of creepy if I think about it, but that is just the truth. And as I got through into college, as sometimes happens, I found myself moving and drifting further and further away from my Christian upbringing, and found myself diving deeper and deeper into, searching out things about what I called the unknown, the unexplained, the paranormal, all of that. I got really interested in all of that, and I think I was just on a quest for meaning. I was on a quest for knowledge, and as a result, I just kind of got deeper and deeper into this whirlwind of esoteric type of mysteries and that type of thing, and that all just sort of led into me embracing what I would call just sort of a new agey type of paradigm. I started dabbling in that, and it kind of increased into being a little more occultic in nature. I tend to find that people who dabble in the New Age at first, it's very sort of flower power, New Agey, rainbows, and fairies and all of that. It's like very light, and you surround yourself with white light and all that junk, but it almost always gets dark. It has this progression where it takes a darker and darker path, and that was definitely true with me. I got married, I had a nice life and everything, but there was a series of sort of tragic events that all happened at the same time for me, and as a result, I really, whatever was left of me that thought that there might be a God, became very angry at him, and I started around this time having really severe panic attacks and really bad anxiety problems, and that just pushed me even further into the New Age, because I wanted to achieve some sort of healing and quote unquote inner peace, right? And And so, meditation, surround yourself with white light, manifest your own reality, law of attraction, all of that, very deep into it. And I had started a website called extraordinaryintelligence.com, and the reason I started the site was because I was on this sort of spiritual quest, and I wanted to write about things that were of that nature. I wrote about the New Age, I wrote about the occult, I wrote about all of these things that I had questions about, and the site became popular relatively quickly because there was a lot of other people in the internet world that were asking those same questions and had the same interests. So I achieved a bit of notoriety just from that. And there was one night where and sometimes when I tell my testimony, I forget this part, and I think it's really important. There was one night where I was in my kitchen and I was doing the dishes, and I had the radio on because I was a talk radio geek even at that time, and I was listening to Coast AM, hosted by George Norrie, and there was just this really interesting and intriguing guest on that I had never heard before, and his name was L.A. Marzulli. And I didn't know who he was, but he was really interesting and really fascinating, and he was talking about all of this prophecy stuff and talking about, the guidebook to the supernatural, and I was like, oh, that's so cool, that sounds like Nostradamus or something, and I need to get that book, and at some point during the interview it became clear to me that he was talking about the Bible. And I was like, whoa, my first instinct was, oh, great, turn this junk off.
Right.
But it just intrigued me, and it wasn't something that really super stuck with me, but it planted a little seed, and I think it has something to do with what led me to the next step, which was sometime later I was alone in my office, and I was researching something on the computer. And I was having a particularly bad panic attack. It was probably one of the worst panic attacks I've ever had in my life. Thought I was having a heart attack, thought I was dying, I was crying, I was sweating, I was just like really a mess. And I was just sobbing. My heart was beating out of my chest, my hands were shaking, and the whole time my one trembling hand was on my mouse, and I was just clicking around different tabs on my screen. I wasn't even paying attention to what I was doing anymore, just through this haze of tears. And I looked up at the computer at some point, and my vision just kind of was clear for a moment, and on the screen, I don't know what website I was on, I don't know how I got there, but on the screen it said, be anxious for nothing, but with everything, with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will comfort your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Now, I cannot express to you exactly the level of rebellion that I had been in up to this point, the level of blasphemy in which I had engaged up to this point. But for some reason, in that moment when I was probably at my rock bottom, lowest of the low, messiest point of my life, as I was struggling with anxiety, this scripture, this verse appeared on my computer screen telling me to be anxious for nothing. And obviously it was from Philippians. I knew it was from the Bible. I had just never read it before. I had never seen those words before, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. It really did. And I realized that that was beyond coincidence. And I just laid my head down on my desk, sort of probably right on my keyboard, and I said, God, if that's really you, if you're talking to me right now, can you give me some kind of a confirmation? And he did. it was just sort of a feeling. It was just something that I can't quite describe, but it was, it was a confirmation. And I said, okay, I'm ready. And I just in that moment, I just gave my life to Jesus Christ right then and there. And it was a pretty profound experience because, you hear this sort of cliche phrase that, the weight of the world was on my shoulders, but that's really the way it felt, and it just lifted. It was like the fog lifted, and suddenly I felt free, and free of the burden of this anxiety that I'd been carrying around and that I had been trying every way to get rid of except the one true way. And, it was pretty incredible because I think of it just like, how, and you can relate to this, Josh, because you're a father, no matter what your kids do, no matter how bad they are, even if your child looked at you in the eye and said, "Daddy, I hate you," you would still put your arms around him if your little child was crying. Yeah. And that's the way it felt. It felt like I was a bad, bad kid, and he loved me anyway and did not like seeing me suffer. And how amazing of a feeling is that? How profound. And so yes, I that was my moment where I gave my whole life to Jesus. And I'm not going to sit here and say that everything miraculously became better, and it was, obviously it was a struggle and it was a journey and that type of thing, but it was the truest truth that I had ever felt in my entire life, and the surest certainty that I had ever felt in my life, that this was finally the answer to every question I ever had, and my life has never been the same.
Wow. Oh, you're going to make me cry on my own show.
Well, I've told that story so many times now, and sometimes, honestly, I kind of feel like I'm rattling it off like this memorized speech, and every once in a while I just pause and it hits me just the profound love of our Lord and the wretched state that I was in. Why would he want me of all people? But it just kind of says everything about his character and everything about how, all of our righteousness is as filthy rags. He wants us just as we are. You can never be good enough to deserve it. He loves us.
Yeah, amen. Wow. I think even just beyond that, it's such a powerful testimony. But I think for me personally, why it hits so close to home is because I can relate to so much of it. I mean, even down to the L.A. Marzulli thing, because God used L.A. Marzulli to open my eyes too and get me out of New Age practices and theology, and I was I was into that for a long time because I too was I was raised as a Christian. I believed in God and all that, but there were so many questions that I had that just were not answered, and especially concerning spiritual warfare, because I was being just terrorized by I had sleep paralysis. I had to deal with that, but I knew it wasn't just a medical condition. I was being terrorized by really evil forces on a personal level and on a physical level, and I couldn't wrap my head around that for a long time. And when I was about 18, a friend of mine asked if I had ever heard of astral projection, and at that time I didn't know what she was talking about, and I said no, and she gave me a book about it, and I read that thing frontward, backward, sideways. I ate it all up. Like, I was like, oh, here's the answer. And because she was saying if you can learn to do this, maybe you can defend yourself against these things. I wasn't realizing at the time that that's just me taking matters into my own hand against forces I have no idea about, instead of just leaving it up to God. But I didn't really have any kind of background in any kind of spiritual warfare, and the little bit that I did kind of know, it didn't help me, with the sleep paralysis stuff. So I thought, well, maybe this is an option. And once I spent months in meditation and trying to get it to work, and then it finally did after about 6 months. I mean, I even became a vegetarian to try to do this, because the book said that if you don't eat meat, then it could actually help with that somehow. But I was really into it, and it took about 6 months, but I actually did. I was able to leave my body, and that to me was the first real proof that I ever personally experienced that there was something outside of physical existence. Growing up in the church, I knew it, but I never experienced anything supernatural that was any good. Everything supernatural or everything outside of physical existence that I experienced was like evil. And so this was the first, I thought at the time, this was the first positive experience that I ever had. So by then I had already long realized there would be no way I could use that during sleep paralysis because of the amount of meditation and stuff that it takes. It wouldn't work. But I was already hooked. I was already in. And, I can look back now and see that the enemy used that to hook me in. So from that, I got really into New Age theology, and I didn't deny God, but I did something that may even be worse. I tried to incorporate. I tried to mix New Age and Christianity. I tried to, because I didn't want to risk losing salvation or anything, even though at that time I didn't even know if that was possible, but I didn't want to risk it. And so I kept the stuff that I thought would be good for me. I wasn't thinking at all about God. I was just thinking about myself. And then I was trying to put in all this New Age stuff, and my rationalization, I was thinking at the time, like, well, maybe there's the Bible doesn't tell you everything, so maybe this can be true too. And I was just so I was deceived, but it was by my own. I was willingly ignorant. Like, that's a good way of putting it. I was doing it to myself by not taking God seriously, and it made it. At first, there weren't. I didn't notice anything negative really, but after a while, I didn't notice anything negative until I decided I wanted to stop because of L.A. Marzulli. I had turned on the TV, and there was this program called It's Supernatural, and I was familiar with the show, enough. Like, I've heard of it, and I kind of had some experience with it, and I was sort of familiar with the format. But this guest that they had on was completely different than anyone I'd ever saw on there. And he was talking about Genesis 6 and the Mark of the Beast and the alien implant thing, and I've always been like interested in that, but I never heard any good. That was my biggest question when I was a kid: are aliens real, and how do they fit in the Bible if they are? And the only answer that I ever got from the church was, no, aliens aren't real, it's demons. And then I would say, well, where's that in the Bible? Well, that's just one of those things you have to take on faith. That wasn't really a good enough answer for me, because it's like, well, if I'm taking it on faith, I'm having faith that you're right, but what authority are you speaking on? If it's not, if you can't even quote a single Bible verse. So I thought, well, there's just not an answer in the Bible then. And so I was trying to use New Age to find the answers to that, which of course they have a ton to say about aliens. And I was eating all that up. But then I heard LA on this show that I just happened to I wasn't really looking. I just happened to turn the TV on and it was on. And he was talking about that from a biblical perspective. This was the first time I'd ever heard of Genesis, all this Genesis 6 stuff, or Nephilim, or this was the first time I ever heard. And I was absolutely enthralled with it, and I recorded it. And when my wife got home, I said, "You have to watch this," and we watched it together, and that really completely changed our lives. That was once I realized that I had to check in, I had to look into it myself, so I dusted off my Bible that I hadn't opened in years, and my wife and I looked at it and read it, and we got onto LA's site and saw his blog, and we were reading all this stuff, and we ordered some of his DVDs, and it really opened our eyes, and it got us excited about the Bible, which I had never really been excited about the Bible before that. But along with that came a lot of conviction, which was a good thing. But it was I couldn't rationalize the things I was doing anymore. I had to face it head on. I had to really be honest with myself and to God, and admit that I was knowingly doing a lot of things, living my life in a way that was completely against God, and that he was not happy with. And that realization hurt a lot, but I know it hurt God more that I was doing it.
Yeah.
But just how loving he is, he forgave me, and not only that, I rededicated my life to Christ. I got rid of all my New Age DVDs and books. I threw them all away, and I completely renounced the whole thing. And that really if I wasn't saved before, I was definitely saved then. And I'll never be able to express the gratitude that I have for God for taking the time, all that time that I was knowingly going against him and doing all these horrible things that I shouldn't have been doing, knowing full well that I was wrong, but trying to convince myself I wasn't, yet he still had enough love and patience and kindness towards me that he was willing to suffer through that, all that stuff that I was doing, to bring me back, and he did. And I mean, I'll never be able to really put into words what that did for me, or what it's been doing for me, or it really did completely change our lives, and my wife too. And so I renounced all that stuff, and of course the enemy didn't like that at all, and all the spiritual attacks got way worse, and it started affecting our day-to-day lives. It got so bad, and at this time I only knew about LA. I didn't know about anybody else in what's sometimes called the fringe Christian thing. I didn't know anybody else, and I've only heard of LA. So I took a chance. I mean, I knew he was pretty popular in this stuff, so I didn't know if I'd be able to get a hold of him, but I took a chance and emailed him. And his wife actually emailed me the next day and said, LA read your email. He wants to talk with you. He's on the road now, but he wants to know if you can give him a call tomorrow. And I said, absolutely. Like I wasn't expecting that. I mean, here's LA. He's been on TV. He's been on Ancient Aliens, on the History Channel, and he's like this big, to me, big name guy, and yet he's willing to take time to talk to me and counsel me through this stuff. And
he's so remarkable. He really is.
Yeah, and every time since then that I've had the chance to talk to him, it's been like that. He's really warm and nice, and he's willing to take time out of his schedule. So I called him, and my main thing was I was so excited about the Genesis 6 stuff. I knew that I wanted to write a book, and I knew that I wanted to get started in doing like what he was doing. And when it was like right when I got started with that was when all that stuff all the stuff from the enemy came up. So I had just one simple question. I asked him, when you first got started, did you have to deal with this stuff too? Because this is what I'm dealing with, and I have no idea what to do about it.
Yeah.
So he talked to me, and he gave me a lesson in spiritual warfare, and really he taught me about the authority of Jesus and how to use his name to cast these things out and to close the portals that they've come through, and it worked. I mean, I saw real results from that, and so I mean, I couldn't be more thankful to him, but even more thankful to God for using him, and of course for him being obedient to God to be used by him. But God really used LA in my life in such a big and powerful way. So so that really led, and that's when I wrote Disclosure, and that really led me down the path that I'm on now, and that's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing now. That's the only reason I've had access to this kind of life that I'm living now, and I don't. It was just a life-changing thing, and it was really when I came into myself and realized why God created me. And I'd never, before then, I had never been able to say that, like, I know why God created me. That was always my prayer, was, God, why did you put me here? Because people that listen to this show, and I have this bone disease, and it was just every day was just living in constant physical pain and not knowing my purpose in life, and I wasn't contributing anything to anybody, and it was just my constant prayer. The only thing that I ever really talked to God about or ever asked him about was, why did you put me here? What is the point of an existence like this? This is worthless, and I had some anger too, but God did answer me, but I believe the reason he took so long was because I had to get to a point in my life where I was ready to be convicted, because if he would have tried to tell me earlier, I would have brushed it off. I would have rationalized my way out of it. I wouldn't have. I wasn't in a place before where I'd be willing to admit that I was doing something wrong. So God, in his just eternal patience, waited until I was ready, and then he revealed it to me, and LA was a big part of that. So yeah, I am eternally grateful for that. But I think that's why your testimony hits so close to home with me, because it really is similar.
Well, and I think it's a really good example for people, even if there's people who are listening right now who are maybe listening because they found your show because they're curious about some of the topics that you discuss, and they're just listening because they're interested or they're intrigued. I think it's really important that people realize that, sometimes I think there's this incorrect idea that, maybe someday I'll give God a chance, but I'm really bad right now, and I know that, I would have to fix a lot of things about myself before I would even consider, looking into the Bible. And I would just say that is not necessary. You do not have to, put on your Sunday best and clean off all the dirt before you come before God. Come before him just as you are, as dirty and broken and ugly as you are inside. All you need is the willingness to humble yourself before him and just acknowledge that you're lost and you're scared and you're confused and you can't do this alone. And he will say, I'm right here. All you had to, I had very much the same way of thinking myself. In fact, I can look back and I can say that there was probably always a little part of me that thought that God was probably there in some sort of nebulous form. I didn't get it, but I just thought, just he's maybe there. And I always sort of used that in a very manipulative, almost like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Like, I could do whatever I wanted. I could just be as nasty as I wanted to be. I could engage in whatever kind of crapola that I felt like I wanted to. And then, like, oh, well, God's there. He'll forgive me, right? And
Yeah.
It's just of course, his grace goes beyond any of our understanding, and I think that's really important, but it's harmful to ourselves when we're so distant from him that we think that we don't need him, but we have him as like our backup plan.
Yeah.
If my plans don't work out, then maybe I'll see what God wants to do.
Right.
I would just say, don't wait for that moment. Don't wait for the lowest of the low, or the moment when you think you've got yourself together enough to impress him, because he's not impressed.
No.
He just loves us, and he wants us, and that's all he just wants us to come to him and just sort of surrender this notion that we have that we can fix everything ourselves. And just, if the minute that you realize that it's actually the simplest thing in the world to just relinquish all of that control
Yeah.
that we try to have over our own lives. And that's really what the New Age is about. It's about believing that you have this level of control over yourself, over your surroundings, over the universe, over your reality, that is all something within your manipulative control. And what need have you for God if you have all of this power inside yourself to achieve what your wildest dreams and your wildest desires? What use is God to you if you believe that you can do all of that yourself? But as I said, it inevitably takes a very dark turn once you start to realize that it isn't achieving what you had hoped you could achieve with it. And I would say the caveat is that not to presume that there is nothing to it, because certainly there are forces that can be manipulated, and certainly there are deceptions that can make you believe that you are achieving certain ends. But the dangerous part of these New Age philosophies is not in that they don't work, but that in some cases that they do. But what price are you paying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with what you were saying before about, you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to clean yourself up, because it's a process. Nobody, maybe I shouldn't say nobody, because I think there are some rare occasions where somebody will get saved and then just there's an immediate, immediate, like flipping a switch, like an immediate 180 change. But typically that's not my experience. My experience when I rededicated my life to Christ, it was a long process, and a process I'm still in, and it's a lifelong journey. You're never going to be like good enough compared to a perfect a sinless God. Like, we can't compete with that.
No.
We're never gonna be to the point in our lives where we can say, okay, I can stand before you now. That's not gonna happen. But what's so great about our God is He doesn't expect that out of us. He knows full well everything that's in our hearts, even better than we do, because we tend to rationalize things, and we look at things through our own lens. God doesn't do that. He sees the raw truth of everything that's in us. So he knows even better than we do all the filthiness and everything that's against him, yet He still wants us anyway. I have a friend who's an atheist, and I'm still trying my hardest to get through to, but it hasn't happened yet. But I'm still praying for him and still trying. But when I asked him what's the hang-up, what is it that is stopping you from at least considering this as an option, and he said, I think once I have it to a point where I can understand it, once I can figure it out, once if there is a God, I feel like I would want to give Him the proper respect that He would deserve if He's real, by at least being able to understand it before jumping into it, and being able to look at it from all angles. And I told him, I said, well, you're never going to get there then.
No.
Because I've been in this technically my whole life, and I'm not there. There are people that have been in this 2-3 times as long as I have. They're not all there. We're never going to get there. Yeah. I said, if you're saying that, I told him, because we've been close enough friends for a lot of years now where I can be honest with him. And I said, honestly, that's a cop out. I said that's and I understand it, because that's the same kind of rational view I took when I was in New Age stuff. I said that's your self-rationalization, so that if by chance you're wrong and you will have to stand before God someday, you're rationalizing it that you'll just tell him that. But that's not going to fly.
Right.
Because right now you're having me explain to you you're not supposed to have it all figured out. The only thing that you need to realize is that you're not perfect and that you are in need of a Savior, because you cannot even begin to hope that you can compare against a perfect God. But the good thing is that God, in his perfect loving kindness and all that good stuff, he'll forgive you for all that. You don't have to worry about that. You just need to accept it. And James 4:8 says that if we draw nigh to God, he'll draw nigh to us. And I think that's so important.
Amen.
Because the chronology of that verse, we have to make the first move. He's not going to force anything on us. He's a gentleman. It doesn't say God will draw nigh first. We have to draw nigh to God, and then he promises he'll draw nigh to us. So he'll meet us halfway. And but we got to take the first step. So I totally agree with what you were saying with that. So if anybody's listening that doesn't know God, or that is kind of on the fence about it, this might not be the most eloquent way of saying it, but just try it out. What do you have to lose?
There's also the problem of people thinking that they have done something so bad in their lives that even if they really, really, really wanted to, they couldn't come to God because they've just been so bad. Let me tell you a little example of just how bad I was. I actually had associated with a group of self-proclaimed Luciferians and Satanists. And while I didn't necessarily partake in the things that they were doing, I became sort of, this is terrible to think about, but sort of their PR person. I did a lot of their artwork for their group, and I worked on some of their marketing stuff, and I was that intimately involved with a group of people like that. And I don't know if there are levels of blasphemy that get much worse than that, to be honest.
Right.
I don't talk about it all that often, not because I believe that, I'm not forgiven or anything like that, but because, quite frankly, it's just not something I like to remember.
Right.
But the level of rebellion in which I had engaged, if there was a limit to how, oh man, you have been really bad, you crossed the line. I should have been there, but thankfully, thank God for his forgiveness and his mercy and his grace, that there literally is no limit. There is not that one unforgivable thing that you could have engaged in that will exclude you. You are loved even in those moments. And the Holy Spirit, grieves for those who are locked into that type of behavior. But if you just surrender yourself and recognize how incredibly filthy and broken that you are, but you just put yourself in that wonderful place that I came to know, where it's hard to describe to people, because it's like it's a really, I use the word ugly because it's just the ugliness of the things that I had engaged in and the brokenness that I was experiencing in my soul, in the very pit of my being. That was the moment when God just ripped my chest open and filled me with so much love, and I realized that it didn't really matter how bad I was before. All that mattered was that I I was willing to give it to him, and it really is life-changing. And like you said, it's not necessarily something that all of a sudden everything becomes perfect. And I really try, I have to be careful sometimes, because I become so passionate about how much my life had changed that I hope I don't give the impression to people that all of a sudden, like, now I'm this really good person all the time,
Right.
and I never do anything bad, and I'm still a sinner,
Yeah.
and I still struggle every single day of my life, but every single day I have this brand new opportunity to give it to him, and he takes it, and he forgives me, and he loves me, and renews me every single day. And how beautiful is that?
Yeah. I mean, he really is the perfect father. And and to speak to people who think that they might have done something that's too bad, or too horrible to be forgiven. Well, look at Paul. I mean, he
Mhm.
killed Christians.
Mhm.
I mean, before his conversion on the road to Damascus, that was basically his job, was killing Christians.
Yeah.
I mean,
Chief among sinners, right?
yeah, absolutely. And look at what God did with him. I mean, he has one of the most powerful conversion. And I mean, if it weren't for Paul, we wouldn't have most of the New Testament. And so I mean, God can use, regardless of what you've done, if you're willing to give it to God, God can use you in such a powerful way. I mean,
Mhm.
and Paul is the perfect example of that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and there was another point I was going to make too, and I think it slipped my mind. But uh, you were talking about being renewed every day. Oh yeah, he the thing about God is a lot of times we put these titles on him, and that's fine. That's fine, but he really is. It's not just our Father, Lord in heaven. He's our dad.
Mhm.
And that's the thing with somebody who's listening. I grew up basically in a fatherless home. I didn't have really a dad. I kind of did, but not really, and that's a whole other story. But uh, looking back now, I mean, and even to this day, God's my father, but he's my dad too. I
Right.
mean, there are times when I pray and I call him dad, because that's what he is.
Yeah.
That's the level of personal relationship that he's allowing us to have with, that he wants, not even just allowing us to have, but wants with us.
Right.
We're his children. He wants his children to know him. And that was one of the most profound things that I've ever come to the realization to, is that he it's not just Father, it's not just Lord, it's not just God. He's our dad. And
Well, absolutely. I mean, the entire Bible, from creation all the way to Revelation, is God's quest to be close with us and to have a relationship with us. I mean, that's the entirety of the Bible. I think sometimes people look at the Old Testament and they think, well, there's none of that really in there. But really, from the moment when he was walking in the garden, with Adam and Eve, till you go forward to the tabernacle, and you just every step of the way, it's this relationship that God has with his creation. It's so incredibly beautiful. uh, and ultimately, of course, when he sends us Christ, and then the Holy Spirit, and just the whole story, the whole, someone got mad at me. I'm gonna tangent a little bit.
yeah, go for
Someone
it.
got someone got mad at me uh, one time because I used the word story. Because in reference to the Bible, because they thought that story meant fiction, that I was implying that it was fiction, and that's not at all what I mean when I say story. What I mean is, like, it's the greatest story ever told, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's this incredible story because it's true.
yeah,
and and I guess I'm going off on a tangent here, but that's the part that I think I never really got when I was in church as a kid and as a young adult. I never really got the fact that he wants this closeness and he wants this relationship, and he's not this tyrannical God that's just smiting left and right, which is, I think, sometimes the impression that can be given. Not at all. It's an intimacy that once you understand it and once you felt it, it's the greatest thing ever. It changes your whole world. It changes everything.
Amen. I don't have this written in my questions, but I get the feeling that there's going to be somebody listening to this that maybe hasn't heard this before, or maybe who doesn't know God, and that might be involved in some things, and that maybe their eyes are being opened now. If there's somebody listening, if there's somebody listening that wants to know God more, wants to give it a chance at least, how would you advise them to go about doing that?
Well, it's actually really simple, and I'm going to go back to L.A. Marzulli. He's got a really great testimony, and part of what he advises is that you just, and you alluded to this too, that you just try. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be a biblical scholar. You don't have to even really know what you're going to say. I mean, there's not a specific prayer that you have to pray. There's not a specific word that you have to say. There's not God doesn't work like a magical incantation. It's just humbling yourself enough to recognize that you can't do it alone, and reaching out. And, it might be something as simple as just saying, help me. God doesn't care if you're eloquent. God doesn't care if you, have this profound soliloquy of all of, your wrongs that you've done and how unworthy you are. None of that matters. Just cry out and say, help me. Even if you just say, are you there? Reveal yourself to me. Deliver me from this. Deliver me. And he's faithful to do it. Every time. He's faithful. And he hears your cries, and he just give yourself the opportunity to recognize that you need a Savior, that you can't do it alone, and then just ask. Just ask. Especially people who are involved in the New Age, you have this inquisitive mind, and you've been on this journey. You've been seeking answers. You've been on this quest. I know that quest. I took that journey for many, many years. But I also know that you like to fancy yourself as an open-minded person. I mean, in fact, you've probably said many times in your life, I'm open to everything. I'm open to whatever, it's all good, it's all real, the universe is vast and all this stuff. Well, then I would say to you, if you truly see yourself as someone who is open, I ask that you open your heart to God and just ask Him into your life. Invite Him. Tell Him that you want Him. Tell Him that you need Him. And He's right there. Like, He's right there. It's actually that simple. Just be sincere about it. Be sincere about it. You don't have to approach it like it's a challenge. Just be sincere and say, I need you. I need help. And he will respond. He's faithful to do so.
I could not have said that better myself.
I mean, it really, sometimes I think that that there's this idea that you have to say the right words. You have to, articulate yourself in such a way that that's the most correct or the most pious or the most sincere. And honestly, you don't have to do that. You can literally just say what's in your heart, and maybe all that's in your heart is, oh, I am just so sad, and I'm so broken, and I'm so alone, and I need help. Sometimes that's all you've got, and that's all you need to say. That's
Yeah.
that it works just as well as, a 10-paragraph prayer that someone else wrote for you. Just say, help me, you know?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I honestly I couldn't have said it better myself. It's so true. God knows what's in our hearts, even before we know what's in our hearts. He knows what's in our hearts, and
Hmm.
all He wants is just for us to be honest with Him. And even if we have questions, or even if we're mad, I mean, there have been times that I've
Hmm.
been angry at God, and I never like cussed Him out or anything, but there have been times that I've been upset, and it's just like, God, what are you doing? Like
Hmm.
I cannot wrap my head around this, but He's so loving and patient that
Yeah.
He will listen to that, and He will respond, and that wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm getting choked up.
Well, and I think it's something that we all go through. I mean, this has been quite a year for me, and I've been had through a lot of ups and downs, and I'm still in the thick of it. And I've had my moments where I'm ticked off at God. It's silliness, but it's our human nature,
Exactly.
and it's just a reactionary thing, and we're always so quick to be, point the finger, find someone to blame, and sometimes God is the most convenient uh, avenue to take, and it happens, and He's so merciful, and He's like, he always gives me this, when I'm in those moments, I always get this feeling like He's going, I know,
Yeah.
I hear you, I know, it's okay. And it's all of these other different religions and belief systems, their concept of deity is one where you have to, whether it's through Buddhism and the 7 steps of enlightenment, or whether it's through Islam and you have to pray a certain way and face a certain direction and achieve certain levels, or what, whatever it is, the one true God recognizes that the one true God doesn't have those kinds of strings attached. You
Right.
know, he all that is required in the case of God Almighty is to just believe, and you're not expected to live up to some great level of expectations, because you can never, as you said, you can never achieve that. It's impossible. And how desperate it must feel to be part of one of these other belief systems where it's constant striving, 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 striving,
Yeah.
to be good enough, good enough, good enough. And in some, isn't it just wonderful to just be able to relinquish some of that and just, breathe and release it and just say, I am a sinner. Please
Yeah.
forgive me. I did it again.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to make light of sin, but it's one of those things where there's a certain burden that's lifted off of you when you know that it's never going to be good enough, that God is not going to be impressed by your attempts at righteousness.
Right. Absolutely. And yet He forgives us anyway, and
Mhm.
that's the hope that we can really hold on to, is that we're not expected to be good enough.
Right. That's right.
Oh wow. Yeah, and especially like with my experience in New Age theology and stuff. I mainly hovered around like the astral projection side of it, but I got into a lot of the other stuff too.
Mhm.
And there are so many things involved with that, where everything is it's self-centered kind of.
Yeah.
Everything is your own making. But what comfort does that bring to somebody who goes through tragedy? If they think that they're in
Mhm.
control of their own universe and everything, and their child dies or something,
Mhm.
what kind of comfort does that bring? If anything, it's going to be like, oh, I should have did better, or that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And we with God, we don't have to deal with those sorts of things, because there's a more truthful understanding of that. So I wanted to about the New Age stuff. I wanted to ask, because there
Mhm.
are a lot of doctrines.
Yeah.
What are some of the most dangerous doctrines of New Age theology, and what is it exactly that makes them so dangerous?
Well, for me, the thing that I find the most dangerous is because I'm seeing it so much now, and frighteningly, I see it inside the church too. Is the whole concept of the law of attraction,
Yeah,
and I find it to be frighteningly dangerous because a there is a level of it that works, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So for those who don't know, the law of attraction is really this principle that whatever it is that you want for yourself, whatever it is that you desire for your personal self or your environment, is something that you can manifest into being by well, whether it's things that you say, whether it's by visualization, whether it's by putting things out into the world, the concept that what you put out you will bring back to you. Um, and really, at the end of the day, it's no different than magic. Really, and uh, um, it's a pretty package on the idea of basically saying your right words and using an incantation or a spell or a trick or whatever to bring this thing to. One of the most popular ways that it's put right now is to manifest your own reality. And people who have heard of things like The Secret, for example, they will be familiar with the concept, even if they don't necessarily label it as the law of attraction. And the problem with the biggest problem, there's many problems with it, but one of the biggest problems with the law of attraction is there's no room for God in that equation.
right.
There's no room for uh, for Jesus Christ when you are in this paradigm where you are manifesting everything unto yourself. And unfortunately, it is a very prevalent thread throughout the New Age, but we're also seeing it creeping into the church in the prosperity gospel and things of this nature, which is no different than the law of attraction. Because once again, when it happens inside the church with like through the prosperity gospel and things like this, is you are treating God as one who you can manipulate to do your will, as though the Creator Himself is no different than the universal energies that you're trying to manipulate. And you know, it's particularly dangerous because it can be twisted through certain scriptures where people will say, well, the power of life and death is in the tongue, and ask and you shall receive. They'll take these things and they'll say, well, that proves that the law of attraction is biblical, right? Well,
Right.
the difference is that when you are trying to, quote, manifest your own reality, or when you are engaged in this behavior, what are you really trying to do? You are trying to elevate yourself to a godlike status. When you say, I'm trying to manifest my own reality, what you're really saying is, I'm being a creator.
Right.
And I am trying I am trying to be on par with the creator, and it kind of becomes really gnostic too, you know, where it's like this idea of the demiurge and this idea that, you know, there's this flaw in creation, and if I could achieve this level of consciousness and tap into this level, that, you know, this idea of a heightened consciousness wherein I can now manipulate the very forces of nature. And I know that all sounds really hippy-dippy, but there is a giant swath of the population that very much buys into this. They're seeing it in the Secret. They're seeing it through there's a new one coming out that's called The Power of the Heart, and there's a lot of the same people who were involved in The Secret are now involved in this Power of the Heart, and it's maddening, because that whole thing is about how all you ever have to do is follow your heart, and your heart will never steer you wrong.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, the heart is deceitful above all things, though, you know. But so that was a really long way of saying that I think that the law of attraction is particularly dangerous because of the way it permeates and because of the way it is working its way into the church. And so there's just these lines being blurred, and ultimately if any part of your philosophy puts you in a situation where you think that you could do better than God, you are off track, man.
Yeah.
You are really off track, and don't let fancy terminology like the law of attraction. Ooh, it's a law, but it's just a law of physics. You know, that's to me like people who are involved in the occult, like they're involved in actual magic, saying things like, I practice causal engineering.
Right.
You know, they're only saying that because they know it's bad PR to be like, I can do magic, you know. But it's the same doggone thing. They mean the same thing. It's all about using what you perceive to be your own power to be a creator. And the minute you start playing with that kind of fire, you are saying, I have no need of a creator, or I can do better than the creator. I will put myself, you know, and we of course know that that is the very lie from the garden, right? That ye shall be as gods. This is the very first lie, and it's continuing to this day. And I just feel like this whole movement, and you know a lot about this because you're very well versed in like quantum mechanics and all of this, and you know how easily this can be flipped and manipulated, and suddenly people think that they have these abilities to manipulate the very forces of nature in the universe. And again, the minute you start thinking that you can do that, you don't need God, because you are God, right? Yep. You're the God of your own little universe, and you are in charge, man. So what difference does it make if there's a God out there? Because I've got all this figured out. I can do it all myself. And this is why I say that the New Age always becomes dark. Because as you said, what happens when something really bad happens to you? And you're sitting there thinking, dude, I have been putting so much positive mojo out there, and I have been creating this amazing reality for myself, and I do not understand how this really bad thing worked its way in there, because I didn't put that out there. So how did it come back? And then all of a sudden you're reeling, and you're thinking, okay, what did I do to make this happen? Because obviously I have all this control. So not only do I control the good things, but I control the bad things. And so obviously I made this bad thing happen. And so it's just this snowball of self-destructive behavior that is just, you know, it's just from the pit of hell. Because what a huge burden it ends up being to think that all of this is within your control. I mean, it just spirals into desperation, because ultimately we know none of it's in our control. We don't have a grip on any of it. It's not us doing any of this. None of this power is of ourselves. So it is so, so dangerous, and it actually really grieves me to see how prevalent it's become amongst just everyday people, soccer moms and average Joes. They're all reading The Secret. They're all involved in this. They all think that they can, tap into this weird, universal consciousness and surround themselves with positivity bubbles that will just keep them safe from everything. And it's dangerous. It's really, really dangerous. It's insidious. It's so much more dangerous than when people think of being involved in magic or the occult. You kind of have these images in your mind of people with like a robe with a hood over their heads, and they're scheming and whatever. And I'm not saying that kind of thing doesn't exist, but when you're talking about things like the law of attraction, it's insidious because it seems so positive and it seems so benign.
Right. Yeah, and I know you know about this too, because we've both been in this. The mentality when somebody's involved, it's hard to pull somebody out of that. Like,
yeah.
Because I know when I was in it, I was fully convinced that was the right way, and there wasn't going to be anything that was going to tell me any different. And I mean, because there were I knew like my family would try to talk me out of it, so I just didn't tell them about it. I wasn't going to be talked out of it.
Yeah.
And now, coming out of it and knowing that mentality is so strong and concrete, there are times that I come across people or have friends that are still actively involved in it, and that can be a hard thing to witness to somebody like that. And I'm sure that there are listeners that are listening to this now that know somebody or that have family or friends that are actively involved in this, and they don't have any intention of changing, and witnessing has been just unsuccessful. So drawing from your own conversion experience, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to witness to a person who's actively involved in this New Age stuff?
Well, you're right. It is something where, because the whole thing is so self-centered, and you have, a New Ager has put themselves into a position where they firmly believe that the power of all creation is in their own control. Sometimes they're not very open to hearing from other people because there's this concept that I'm sure you're aware of that you have to disassociate from anyone who's bringing negativity into your life, because then that just screws up the whole idea of manifesting your positive little realm, right? You can't have, and so they see any challenge to what they've this reality that they're trying to build for themselves. They see any challenge to that as negativity, and so there's this instant shutdown where it's like, nope, I cannot have that. You're going to ruin this, and you're going to spoil my energy, all that stuff. So I believe that the best way to approach someone especially someone who's very deeply involved, is there's this idea that you have to just come at these people and scare them straight or whatever. And I find that, maybe that works sometimes, but it's not very effective for people who already have this idea in their head that Christians are all about scaring people.
Right.
Because that's exactly what I used to think. I thought that Christians were all about, scaring me about going to hell and all of this different stuff. And I'm not saying there's not truth to that, but there's a way to approach people that is more effective. And I have found that compassion and empathy is one of the most effective ways to approach someone, especially if there's in some way that you can relate to how they're feeling, is to not come at them in a condemning, shaking your finger at them and just being like, oh, you're being so bad, you're so naughty, you're off track, but actually to approach them and say, I get it.
Yeah.
I get why you're doing what you're doing. I understand why you would want to be involved in what you're involved in. I can't tell you how many times I have said to people, I get it. I'm not even going to sit here and try to say that, you're crazy and off your rocker for dabbling in what you're doing, because I get it. I know why. I know why they're doing it. And so the minute you can start with something like that, you have their attention, because you didn't start by condemnation. And so now the door is maybe a little bit open if they're understanding that you at least kind of get why it is that they believe what they believe on some level. Doesn't mean that you're validating it, but you understand the thought process that got them to that point. And so then it's compassion. Then it's, kind of just approaching them using some of the terminology that maybe they're familiar with and saying, here's something really cool. And you can use the approach of taking some of the things that they believe in and flipping it on its head and using, scripture to explain it. And also I find that, once you can engage in a dialogue with someone who's involved in the New Age, you can kind of slowly start chipping away at some of that control and kind of, saying, isn't it kind of frustrating though? Like, you've been working so hard at this, but yet, these bad things still kind of happen. I mean, doesn't it get frustrating after a while? And that just kind of opens the door. But the important thing is to recognize that every single person is an individual. Every single person is going to react differently. Every single person is going to be open to hearing things in a different way. So I always advise people to take the cue from the person you're talking to. Don't go into it with like this script. Don't go into a witnessing type situation with this pre-prepared set of notes of points that you need to hit. Take a cue from the person and what they tell you. Listen. Listening is really important, because if you open the door for someone to tell you their story, you're going to learn so much more about them. You're going to learn why they are where they are, and then you kind of get a better idea of what it is that they need, and you kind of know how to speak to them. Speak to them with respect, knowing that at the end of the day, they're no less deserving of God's love than you are. We have to be able to relate. We need to have empathy. We need to be compassionate. We need to be sympathetic. And I think that if you can come to them on a person-to-person level and just be real with them, it's so much more effective than. And I know this sometimes comes off as I'm coming down on people who are really super preachy, but really that's not always the most effective way, because I guarantee you, and you know this, Josh, that I guarantee you that if someone is really deep into esoteric knowledge, if they're really deep into the occult, if they're really deep into the New Age, there's not a whole lot of scripture, there's not a whole lot of things that you can say to them that they haven't heard already, that they haven't already prepared a defense for. They already know, they think they know what you're going to say. So sometimes it requires a different approach, and I would say that the best way is to just be real. Just try to have a dialogue. Hear their story. Hear what they have to say. Let them explain to you what they believe, and then just have a conversation. Don't be weird. That's what you know what I mean? Like, sometimes Christians can be kind of weird. They almost like hyperventilate. Like, how am I gonna, I gotta hit all the highlights and all the points. Just have a conversation, and ultimately let the Holy Spirit guide you in the moment, in the situation, with that individual.
Exactly. Yeah, I could not agree more with that, and that's the approach that I take in witnessing too. And also to realize you don't need to get everything out in one conversation with a person. And I think that that's something that's missing in the church that is so important, is that personal touch. You know, I can't even count how many times I have heard Christians say, well, you shouldn't be friends with atheists. Well, how are you going to witness to them? You know, I mean, I'm not saying that street evangelism and handing tracts out doesn't work, because I you know, there are people that get saved that way. But how often do you ever see a personal phone number on a tract? Right. You know, I remember I actually talked about this at the recent conference in Ohio, which I was really happy to be given the opportunity to speak in a panel, and this came up, and I remember when I used to work in fast food, a lot of times, you know, I'd be taking orders through drive-through, and people would drive up, you know, they give me their money, I'd give them their change, and then they would say, oh, and when you have time, read this, and then they would hand me a tract and then take off. I was always upset about that, and I wasn't upset because they didn't realize I was already a Christian or something. I was upset because it's like, okay, here you have the most important piece of information that anybody has ever had, ever, and you're just going to throw it at me and then leave and abandon me and not take the time to, you know, explain it? What if I have a question? You know, to me, it's that. And I'm not saying that doesn't work, because there are people that do get saved by that, and I would rather somebody do that than do nothing. Yeah. But it really lacks it. I mean, most people throw those things away because they're not upset that they've been given a tract. They're upset that they've been abandoned, essentially. And how does that speak to the importance of our message if we're just going to throw it at them and drive off?
And really, what's interesting too is that there's this sort of idea that there's one specific way. Like, for example, the people who go door to door and knock on your door and say, hello, I'm from such and such a church. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? You know, that might, you know, you might come to the door of somebody who at that moment was ready for that question and ready to hear what you have to say. And you also might come to someone who was like how I was, who I would be like, nope, and close the door. You know? And you would have made zero impact on my life because for me it was too aggressive. That's why I think that a personal, individual approach, and when all else fails, there is a certain beauty to the idea of leading by example. If the words that you are saying to someone are making no impact, there is a powerful witness in just showing them Christ through your behavior and the way you interact with people. I mean, it's little things. The other day, I was going through a drive-thru picking up some breakfast, and I got to the window, and the gal said to me, the person who just went through the line bought your breakfast for you, and they told me to tell you that God loves you. Now, wow. You know, what a neat thing. I mean, it was just breakfast. It was an Egg McMuffin. It was a couple of bucks. But now I have to think, if I was a non-believer and that happened to me, that might have been more impactful to me than someone coming up to me and talking about how I was, you know, if I didn't change my ways, I was going to be burning in hell for eternity. Right. You know? There's a certain finesse to the idea that we are all individuals and we all respond to things differently, and there's a very personal approach. But if you can't reach the person with a testimony or with a specific personal witness, just going through life trying to remember that there are always people watching you, that there are always people observing your behavior, you can be Christ. You know, they're the only representative of Christ that they may ever encounter, and what kind of impact can you have on them just by the way you live your life and how you behave and your kindness and your compassion towards your fellow man. That in and of itself is a very powerful witness.
Absolutely. We have to be willing to let others know us, in a way that is honest. Because I think a lot of times, as Christians, we kind of try to stay away from, like let's say, atheists or people who we know are
Mm-hmm.
involved in New Age, and if we do have any encounters, then it's like souped up Christian, like really,
Yeah.
that just that, yeah,
Yeah.
and in my experience, the most success I've ever had in witnessing was when I dropped all that, and I just was just my honest, sinful, horrible self,
Mm-hmm.
but with saying, with the understanding that, God's forgiven me, and I don't have to be perfect. Like my when I kind of dropped the act, basically,
Mm-hmm.
I may have gotten maybe one or two people, maybe, I don't even know, like, saved before. But when I decided to just drop the act and be myself, that's when I really started seeing results, because people can identify with that. And when I was more willing to actually have real conversations with them, and taking the time to get to know their story before I hit them with the Bible, or before
Yeah.
I do any of that stuff, because everybody needs to hear different things. Not like you said, there's not one universal thing that's going to work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We need to learn to take a more individualistic and personal approach, and get to know, like, what everybody has a hang up. Everybody has something that in their lives, or something that has prevented them from why they don't know God yet. And sometimes it's just that they haven't heard it, and then that can be fairly easy, because then it's just you got to inform them. But a lot of times, what I've realized is, a lot of times people have heard it, but there's some hang up. There's either something that they think that's not true, or that there's been some misrepresentation of God. Maybe somebody's hurt them in the past that was a Christian, or they have some outlook on the church, or there's always some hang up there. And when we take the time to listen to them and listen
Yeah.
to what their issues are, we'll know how to respond. That's why I say, if you are a person that gives out tracts and stuff, put your personal phone number on it. I mean,
Yeah.
if your goal is to get people saved, put your personal phone number on it. You might get some prank calls, but isn't it worth it if you can get through to somebody?
Right.
And I mean, but I've had more success in witnessing to people, and actually having people come to me and ask them, or have them ask me to lead them in prayer to get saved. I mean, I've never had that before until I started just being
Mm-hmm.
real with people and being honest. And it really is such a powerful testimony to people, because regardless if they realize it or not, they are craving that, because they're not
Yeah.
getting it elsewhere. And that's why they go to things like New Age, because they're
Mm-hmm.
craving it. And there are even, this was my thing. There are even Christians that almost need to be re-witnessed to,
Mm-hmm.
because they are craving something they're not getting in the church, or from family or friends, or their interpretation of the Bible, or whatever it is. And then, like me, I was craving things that I didn't feel I was getting, so I went into things like New Age, and man,
Mm-hmm.
it really would have been beneficial, even though I don't know if I would have listened to it, but it would have been beneficial if I had somebody there to explain to me why it's not a good idea to mix New Age and Christianity, just because I'm craving something that
Yeah.
I didn't feel I was getting from Christianity. So I wanted to ask you, why, if there's a Christian who's like involved, even stuff like yoga or Reiki, or
Mm-hmm.
something that is seemingly innocent, but it's really not. Well, why is it not a good idea for us as Christians to try to mix those things in?
Well, I think it always comes down to who you're putting your faith in. Are you putting faith in your own hands, in your own power, or are you putting faith in God? And when you start moving into things like, say, Reiki healing, for example, once again, you're not relying on God. You're not relying on Him as your great physician. You're not relying on prayer. You're relying on, once again, your own perceived power that comes forth from your own self to manipulate the things around you. And once again, you are putting yourself in the position of creator. And that's not to say that you shouldn't do things to take care of yourself, like exercise and eat right and all of those things. My goodness, that's all very important. But when you actually are trying to manipulate unseen forces to make changes to your surroundings, you're casting yourself in the role of creator or God. And that is why all of these New Age philosophies that you mentioned, that is their common thread, is that you are pushing God out of the picture and leaning on your own understanding and leaning on your own power that you perceive yourself to have. And ultimately, that is going to take you down the road. Even if you are a professing Christian and you start making allowances for things like, Reiki healing or, The Secret or what have you. I mean, believe it or not, I have known a fair share of Christians who believe that you can incorporate concepts of The Secret into your philosophy.
Yeah, me too.
And it's scary because I don't understand how you are not seeing the connection or the disconnection between what God asks us to do, which is to take it to Him in prayer, and actually saying, you know what, God, I got this one. I'm going to go ahead and just make this happen myself, and I will let you know if I need you.
Right.
That's kind of what it boils down to. You're casting yourself in the role of the ultimate force of change in your own life. And that's no different than any New Age philosophy. You can't have the best of both worlds. There's no such thing as a New Age Christian. There's no such thing as a Gnostic Christian. There's no such thing. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. You cannot be both. Either you surrender yourself wholly to God, or you are relying on your own self to manifest your reality. And it will always lead to disappointment. It will always lead to a darker and a darker and a darker set of desperation, because you can't do it. You can't do it alone. Even when you start to feel like you're having some element of success, it's only going to lead to further realization that you can't do it alone. And so you just can't combine those two worlds. Either you rely on God or you don't. Either you surrender yourself or you exalt yourself. There's really no in between, right? I mean, there's no middle ground, because it's like either you relinquish control of these things and you give it to God, or you relish the control and you push God away. It's impossible to straddle the line. You can't do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that was the hardest realization that I had to come to when, I had to realize I wasn't exactly mixing New Age with Christianity. I was forsaking Christianity for New Age, and that was a hard realization for me to come to, because I had to acknowledge that I was denying my faith. And that can be a tough pill to swallow, but it's an important one. And
yeah.
The good thing about our God is that He is willing to forgive. I'm sure that I've talked on this show, The Sharpening. I've went through my testimony a lot, and a lot of people know the types of things that I was into, and I'm sure that there are people that are interested in you, and because there are a lot of practices that draw from New Age doctrines like remote viewing, astral travel, and there are other forms of witchcraft. And I'm curious, have you had any experience with those things? And if so, what exactly was your experience?
Oh, I was just like a smorgasbord of, just take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that, dabble in a little bit of this, try a little bit of that. As I said, when you get to these people like how I was, where they're just so, it's like we always called ourselves open-minded. Open yourself to the universe. Open yourself to the forces around you. Let the universe have its way with you. And at the end of the day, your mind is so open that your brain falls out. And it's just it's ridiculous but at the time you feel like you're really edgy and you feel like you're really, you're well, that's what the whole concept of trying to achieve this status of oneness with everything. It requires you to, quote, be open to everything. So I dabbled in a little bit of everything. When I was a teenager, I got involved with a group of girls that called themselves witches or Wiccans. And I think a lot of teenagers, maybe especially teenage girls, go through that little bit of a phase. But for me, it was something that got kind of dark, like really fast. And this was before I even got really deep into New Age stuff. I was already sort of rebelling in that regard when I was a teenager, where I was drawing pentagrams on my notebooks and this kind of thing. And I had accumulated a pretty vast library of books about witchcraft and my ethnicity is Hungarian, and so my ancestors were largely, gypsies, and there's a lot of that sort of propensity towards really witchy stuff, I guess you could say, in my own bloodline, in my own history. And so I used to really think that was awesome, and I would buy all kinds of books about fortune telling and palm reading and reading tea leaves and all this stuff, and I really bought it and believed it. When I got more into, as I became older and got more into the sort of more mature New Age stuff, then I started going into, attempting to meditate, and I always say I if ever there was a problem, I would assume the lotus position and surround myself with white light and align my chi, and it's just like buzzword, right? I don't even think I knew what I was saying half the time, but like you mentioned astral travel. Well, I always wanted to. I always thought, if I could really just achieve that level, then I would be getting somewhere. And so I would really tried, and it never seemed to work for me, partly because I just have this problem with calming my mind down.
Oh, me too.
My brain is always going, like even when I'm praying to this day, I'm like interrupting myself. It's a lot like how I talk.
I am the same way.
It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit spastic, and God loves me anyway. But so, meditation was always really hard for me, and so I had to do a lot of deep visualization practices and stuff. And finally, I would get to the point where I really could achieve these certain levels. But when I finally had an experience of astral projection, here's how it went. So I got myself into this I won't tell people how to do it, but it was like, I got really calm, and I got, really relaxed and disassociated from my mind. And essentially what ended up happening was I felt myself sort of, a lot of people describe it as lifting. For me, it was like falling.
Yeah.
And it was falling fast. And it was really strange because it was just darkness. It was just blackness. I didn't have the experience of like looking down at myself or going up to the ceiling or whatever. It was just like I was falling in the dark. And then there was this sense of, I just can only describe it as like, with G-forces pressing against your face and your teeth. And it felt like I was falling that fast. to where there was all this pressure, and then there was like this really loud noise, like this really loud, incredibly almost deafening buzzing noise in my ears, and then I was seeing lights that I tend to describe it as like when you're watching Star Wars and they go into hyperspace, where it's like the stars are flying past you, almost like they're lines, and so that's what my whole vision was filled with, these like streaks and stars and lines, like I was just moving so fast, and the pressure just kept increasing and increasing and increasing, and at some point, like this, and it was the spell or whatever it was that I was just broken, and all I felt was fear, like just super overwhelming, all-encompassing terror. And the minute I felt that fear, I just snapped back into reality, and it was like I could still, even when I was just laying there in my bed, I could still, my ears were ringing from the noise, and my teeth felt like I had been grinding them, like just my whole jaw and my mouth was all sore, and like I just still felt like my skin was kind of tight, as though, you know, you had just been on one of those carnival rides where the force is just pushing your face back. That's really how I felt, and my heart was just racing, and I thought, well, I am never going to try that again. It didn't break me out of the New Age, but it sure broke me out of trying to astral project. It was terrifying. It was the worst feeling ever. And the worst part was everything I had read, it just described it as this amazing, wonderful feeling of, you know, just gliding away. I was falling. I was being pulled into something that I don't even want to think about. It was scary, and I still tried a lot of other ridiculous, crazy stuff after that, but I never, ever tried astral projection again. Never tried it.
Yeah, I had one experience with astral projection that was like that, and I mean, it was like verbatim exactly what you said.
Seriously, like, that's weird.
Yeah. I mean, like the buzzing, and to me, it felt kind of like electricity, like it was like I was being electrocuted or something, and it was kind of similar to how it feels when I go into sleep paralysis. It was so similar to that this one time. And it was a weird arbitrary time that it happened too, because it wasn't like the first time I tried it or the last time I tried it. It was like right in the middle, like it was just one day. I don't even think I was necessarily trying to at that time, but when you do something like that, sometimes it'll just happen spontaneously, even if you're not trying. And I remember I was laying down trying to go to bed, and you know I had astral projected like a bunch of times before that, and didn't really have like a bad experience really with it. It was just pretty much like normal waking life, except you can go through walls and fly and stuff. And, like it wasn't at least for me, it wasn't as like this grand holy experience, or like you're just like I didn't. Like when I left my body, I didn't feel like overwhelming love or anything like that. It just felt like normal waking life, except, you know, the flying and going through walls thing. Right. But this one time, I wasn't even really trying to do it. I was just trying to sleep, and it was just like you said. I was starting to fall asleep, and all of a sudden, everything got like blur. The only difference was this time I wasn't falling, but I do know what that is like, because I did have that before, but I wasn't falling. I was being pulled up, and it was just like you said, like everything got real streaky, just like the whole Star Wars like hyperdrive.
Yeah, like thing. You're flying through space almost, except you're falling through space. In my case, it was like I fell out of a spaceship or something. It was really weird.
Yeah, I everything got like that, and I was zooming through. It was like a tunnel of like just bleary like lights, because I was going so fast, and I just shot up, and I lost track of like where I was. It was just like that for a little while. I didn't really know what to think of it, and I was going so fast I could feel it, like you said, on your face, like you can actually feel it, and all of a sudden it stopped. And I don't know where I was, but I have never experienced fear like that before.
Yeah.
Even in the worst sleep paralysis moments that I've had, it was nothing compared to this. And and yeah, as I was like when it was starting, I like heard that buzzing noise, and I had heard that before when going into sleep paralysis, so that kind of freaked me out. Like I didn't. There's something similar with those two things. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I was in the middle of, it was blackness, but then there were like little points of lights everywhere, like stars. And I immediately thought, I am somewhere in the middle of outer space, really far away from home, and it was just utter loneliness, and it was horrifying because there was nothing. Like it was just all I could see were what I'm assuming were stars. I don't really know where I was, but it was the most lonely, empty, horrifying feeling I had ever had, and I only had it for a split second, but I can't even describe it. And that fear was just like you said, that fear was so powerful, it snapped me back. And I opened my eyes. I was drenched in sweat. I was like gasping for breath, like I just had a heart attack or something. That was so horrifying, but in my own stubbornness and stupidity, it wasn't enough to deter me from continuing my astral projection excursions, because I still did it after that. But that was I don't know what that was, but it was horrifying to say the least.
There is nothing on this earth that I think you could encounter that could compare to the fear that I felt in that moment. And it's like you said, it was a split second of fear. Like at the time, it probably felt like it was going on and on and on. But really, it was a moment. It was enough to snap me out of whatever it was that it was happening, and just this terrifying fear, and it just snapped me out of it. And it was, when I emerged from it, I felt like I had been drowning, like where you just gasping as though you had been underwater, and then you just try to suck as much air into your lungs as you possibly can. And it's so weird, though, to go through something like that, and you and I both had the same experience, that you keep dabbling in this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
You would think, but this goes to the point of, sometimes just the knowledge that there is darkness involved in these types of pursuits is not enough to turn someone away from it, which is why the individual approach is so important. Just recently I was talking to somebody who is very much into the New Age and types of philosophies, and their big thing was that they were a worrier, and boy can I relate. And so they were talking about how they're constantly worried, and so they always felt like they had to go into these meditative states because they were always worrying about what was coming around the corner and stuff like that. And like I said, I can relate. So instantly my first thing that I was saying is like, I get it, but that opens the door. Instead of just dropping, as you say, like tracts on someone, or dropping like these bumper sticker scriptures on them, if you let someone explain their experience to you, you're going to probably have just the perfect Bible verse for that particular experience. I mean, just in that one conversation, I was able to say, well, and I probably, gave myself the disclaimer of, I'm not trying to be overbearing here, but just so you know, that very thing that you're going through, the Bible does address it. I mean, and we just paraphrase where the Bible says, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the worry thereof, or something along those lines. You paraphrase it, but it gets to the point that you can find that perfect scripture that fits their specific experience. And I think that's the most jarring thing of all. If somebody is going through something and you can find something in scripture that is very specific to their situation, like, wow, the Bible is actually telling me not to worry about tomorrow? like to just take things, the day by day, and that's intense because that's what I'm struggling with right now. So it opens up the door because, as we both know, sometimes just the knowledge that these practices, these metaphysical type practices and stuff, can get sketchy is not enough to get you to quit. Like sometimes it takes that unique specific witness that someone can provide to you. That's what does the trick and snaps you out of it.
Absolutely, yeah, and everybody's different, and everybody will have that one thing. Like for me, it was Genesis 6 because I've always been curious by nature, and once I found something that was far more interesting and something that I knew was rooted in truth, instead of like New Age stuff, because New Age truth depends on who's writing it. You never get, like, I read a lot of stuff on New Age and everything when I was in it. I never, and especially astral travel, I never read anything about like that type of horrifying experience ever.
Yeah.
Not once. And I knew, like, okay, other people do this. There's no way I'm the only one that's experienced this. Why isn't anybody talking about it? And so I knew that there was some kind of perversion of the truth there. But it wasn't enough to keep me from doing it. I still kept doing it stupidly enough. But yeah, for me, for my individual need, I needed something that was more that would satisfy my curiosity more, because that was always my quest. I wanted to know and understand. I had big questions about things that I felt, if there was a God, there should be answers somewhere, and I didn't think that they were in the Bible, so I started looking into other things and had to incorporate those things into my beliefs to try to make them fit, which it just didn't work, but I liked to try to convince myself that it did. And and like and I don't know why it was this. I think it's just part of why I was created and part of what I'm doing now, but like I mentioned earlier, the biggest question I always had was aliens, which is kind of a weird, like the biggest question I ever had was, about aliens and how do they exist and how do they fit in the Bible. Once that was addressed from the Bible, that really was like, wow, there are things in the Bible that I don't know. Go figure. I thought I knew everything that was in the Bible, and the stuff that I don't know must not be that important because they didn't bring it up in church. So clearly, if it was important, they would have mentioned it. But and a lot of Christians, I think, are kind of in that mindset where, I pretty much know what's in the Bible, and if they don't talk about it in church, it must not be really that important. Or like my church was always the Old Testament is it's good because it's scripture, but it's pretty much just good for history. So that's about it. And I was never really interested in history at that time. I am now, but at that time I wasn't. So I never really bothered to look through the thing. And But yeah, once that individual need that I had was addressed, unknowingly at the time by LA, but it was God, directing that. Once that it was addressed, then my eyes were open, and I was like, oh my gosh, there is a real reality here that I was not aware of. And like I said earlier, that's the only reason I'm doing the things that I'm doing now. I mean, it just amazes me all throughout the Bible how God can use these broken, flawed people that have so many problems. I mean, Moses couldn't even talk.
Right.
But he can use he could talk, but he had a problem. But he can use these people with like anger problems or depression. I mean, these are like the really strong prophets of the Bible, or like the really like the first people of the church. I mean, they all had personal problems like that, but God was still able to use them.
Well,
I
yeah.
really went off on a tangent there, but go right ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, it was interesting when you mentioned about how, the different things that you had read about with astral travel and that type of thing. They don't talk about the bad things. And I found that to be a very common thread throughout New Age philosophy. And I think sometimes people say the New Age, and I say that a lot, like I was in the New Age. And people who aren't really knowledgeable of it, they think that that's like a religion or like a specific religious practice, but there's a lot of things that fall under the umbrella of New Age,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So, but all of these different philosophies, you're right, they don't tell you about the bad things. They only basically present it as if you try hard enough, you're going to be able to achieve these different levels of peace and harmony and happiness and success and prosperity and all of this stuff. But the one thing that's actually really magnificent and unique about the Bible and about Christianity is that it doesn't like, how do I say this? It doesn't lie to you.
Yeah.
I mean, in John it says, that in this world you will have trouble.
Yeah.
You will have suffering. You will have tribulation. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. So there's this honesty of, yes, you will suffer. You will face trials. But there is an answer to all of it. There is this Savior who has overcome this fallen world, and there's your hope. And there isn't anything like that. There isn't anything like that in any other belief system, because if you go in, as I said, if you go into New Age type practices, you're going to be told, all of this is within your own power. If you encounter badness, it's because you put badness out there and attracted it back to you. And that's obviously through Wiccan type of philosophy. They have their, essentially it's karma. It's like the threefold rule that every bad thing you put out there is going to come back to you threefold. And so once again, it's about you being in control. You are the guide of your own destiny. If you go into, say, Buddhism, they're of course going to say all of life is suffering.
Yeah.
you know.
Yay!
Ooh, that sounds really hopeful. So they'll tell you about the suffering part of it, but there's no hope.
Yep.
There is no redemption. And that is, again, what makes the truth stand so far apart from everything else. There's nothing else out there that compares to the truth of God. And it just really struck me when you were talking about how they never tell you that stuff, because the Bible is just, it's not going to sugarcoat things. It's going to, look at some of the trials of the martyrs,
Oh, yeah.
You're not guaranteed a life that is free from suffering. My gosh, this is what they try to tell you in the prosperity gospel, and it, again, no different than the New Age philosophy. You are told that you have control over all of this, and if you suffer, it's because you sinned too much, or because you are not good enough, or because you didn't pray the right prayer, or whatever. And it's so it's so against what we're actually told in Scripture, which is that you will have trials, you will have tribulations, you will have temptations, and you will encounter suffering. But take heart, because He has overcome the world. And to have that punctuation of hope at the end of everything is what totally sets us apart.
Absolutely, and even just the method of salvation, because every other religion, you gotta do it yourself, you gotta work for it, and then you never really know, like you never know if you've measured up or if you're good enough. You don't have any guarantee or anything. You just gotta
there's no assurance.
Yeah, you just gotta kind of hope that and this whole idea of, well, I'm a good person, so Well, there's a lot of, there's based on what, based on what,
Mm-hmm.
I could, everybody does right, in their own eyes. Everybody self-justifies and think that they're a good person. Even Hitler himself thought that he was a good person and doing right
Sure.
by the world. He did, everybody does. So by what set of standards are we telling ourselves that we're a good person? Christianity is completely different from that, and it says, like you mentioned before, our heart is full of wickedness and all this stuff. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
you're not, but it's okay.
Right.
God's like, I'll take you anyway. I know that you're not perfect. I don't expect you to
Right.
be, and he provides a way for us where we don't the work's already done. He already did it on the cross. We don't have to attain our own salvation. I mean, we would never get
Mm-hmm.
there. we,
No.
we would all be damned. It just would not happen.
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, and I agree with and really like that you brought up too that New Age isn't in itself necessarily its own religion. It's a type of it really branches off into a lot of different things. And when I
Mm-hmm.
was researching for, I mean, I already kind of knew this connection anyway, but when I was researching for quantum creation, one of the things that I dealt with in there was Gnosticism. And I kind of like had a basic understanding of it, kind of, but the more I really looked into it, I was like, wow, this is, it was just screaming New Age to me. But
Yes.
and you brought up Gnosticism a couple of times, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on that. Do you see a similarity between New Age and Gnosticism?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Ultimately, it all comes down to the same thing, which is that, through heightened levels of awareness, of literally gnosis, of knowledge, of practice, that we can achieve divinity in and of ourselves. Of course, excuse me, of course, Gnosticism is this concept that, especially like in its most commonly known form now, which is sort of like the combining, like I think back to when I was involved in New Age philosophies, and whenever you would see someone calling themselves Gnostic, there was like this weird combination of Christianity kind of wrapped up into it, but like they would think of Jesus as more of just like a prophet. But it's this idea that there is this concept of a demiurge, and this is the one who is the creator, but not God, right? And so that's the idea that creation in of itself is flawed, and those who combine Christianity and Gnosticism tend to think of God as we know him, as Yahweh, as this evil demiurge, right? And that we need to achieve levels above that by our own acts, by our own gaining of this esoteric knowledge. And it really is no different than the New Age, because, the New Age, the one thing that kind of solidifies everything under the umbrella of New Age is this sort of pantheistic, all is one type of belief. So if you believe that everything is connected, all is one, God is in everything, everything is God, means that I am God, you are God, that we can all achieve this level of godhood, that ultimately God, like especially in Gnosticism and in New Age, the God, like the ultimate God force, that is kind of how they refer to it a lot, the God force, is this unknowable, sort of nebulous force, energy, it's strictly not personal, not knowable, not reachable, intangible, concept. There's no real even focus on what God is, really. It's just this thing. It's the energy. It's the universe. It's this force. But that's okay, because you don't even need to deal with that, because you've got all the tools in yourself to be a creator. So there's actually no difference. It's all about achieving this level of personal, spiritual godhood, to where you are the creator of your own world. You are the creator of your own known universe, and you are the manifester of your own reality. So they're in lockstep. They're hand in hand. And don't let anybody tell you that it's possible to be a Gnostic Christian, or to say, this is how it's presented a lot of times. I run into this all the time. I get comments on my website all the time. People saying, I'm a Christian, but I tend to lean a little more Gnostic. Like, you can't. That doesn't make sense. It's an oxymoron. It's not compatible. Either you are a Christian and you believe in the Trinity, and you believe in God Almighty, and you believe that Yahweh is the God, creator God, ultimate, supreme being, or you're Gnostic and you believe that he's this flawed demiurge, and that he is, that he's sort of this weird, confused deity that you can kind of be like, oh, I can get a level above that. It's silliness to even contemplate that you can be a Gnostic Christian any more than you can be a New Age Christian who is proclaiming Christ consciousness and all of this jazz. That is another thing. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. When it says in Scripture that oh gosh, I'm just going to butcher this, but this is the thing that you encounter all the time, is these New Agers that consider themselves to be New Age Christians or Gnostic Christians or whatever. They'll always go to, the kingdom of God is in your midst. And they take that to, the kingdom of heaven is in your midst. They take that to mean that, that the kingdom of heaven is in your heart, and it's in all of us, and it's something that we can create, and it's something that we can be, manifest in. But they miss the point that is referencing Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah.
He is in us. He is in our midst. We are not the creators of heaven. We are not the manifestors of it. It's Jesus Christ who is in their midst when they're referencing that in Scripture. So it's just like this twisting. It's like this disregard for pretty much anything else in the Bible except maybe 4 or 5 different phrases that fit their cause. But absolutely, they're very much in lockstep. They're one and the same in all intents and purposes. It's very much the aims are and the goals are the same.
Yeah, and the scary thing is, like, the reason that, like, I was researching that for a book about, like, quantum physics, which is like, what do those things have to do with each other? But a lot, like, it's crazy. A lot of Gnostic interpretations are being put on scientific discoveries, like, and that was like the main thing that I was trying to show with that book is that the scientific discoveries don't always match the interpretations. Like, we can accept science without having to accept the interpretations that are attached to it, because they'll look at things like in quantum mechanics and things where it has actually been shown. Now, this is on a quantum level, so it's incredibly small. Like, it's ridiculous how little it is, but that we do have certain influences over things, but right. It's not a creative force kind of thing. We're or and it's not on a like a macro level. Like I can't have a tree shoot out of the ground by thinking of it or anything. I might be able to, I'm on a quantum level, I might be able to rearrange a couple particles or something,
Yeah.
but that is on such a small, but we can't like, but they'll take that and they'll explode it into this big thing, and then they'll even put interpretations that are incredibly Gnostic by saying, well, see, this shows that if there is a God, then it is this force, this impersonal, unknowable force that's just kind of there. It's a higher form of energy. And then they'll say that that's science. And it's like, oh, man, no wonder the church doesn't want anything to do with science when they feel that they have to accept those interpretations.
Well, have you seen those documentary or quote unquote documentaries like What the Bleep Do We Know?
Yeah. I referenced that. Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's just 100% trying to take this real science of quantum physics and manipulate it into fitting into this paradigm of New Age philosophy.
Yeah.
And of course, like you said, like in The Secret, for example, if you've ever seen The Secret DVD, there's this, like, one of the very first examples they give is that you're like this little boy and you want a shiny new red bicycle. And so you start dreaming about the bicycle, you start thinking about the bicycle, you start drawing the bicycle, and what do you know? The next day, this bicycle just shows up. You manifested a bicycle into reality. It doesn't work that way. You can really want a bicycle and then go and work and save enough money to buy a bicycle, and then, by that means, sure, you can manifest it into being. But it isn't something that was like a metaphysical conjuring of a bicycle, but that's how they present it. Like, make your vision board and your dream board and put the pictures of all, put pictures of money and put pictures of a mansion and put pictures of all this stuff on your dream board, and then focus on the dream board every day, and the universe will have no choice but to comply with this reality that you manifested.
And in reality, it's just idol worship.
It is, absolutely. It's so funny. But again, that happens in our churches now too.
Oh yeah.
They're saying, put all those thoughts of positivity out there, and if you tell God that you want money, He has no choice but to bend to your will and give you money, because God can be manipulated.
Yep.
It's all part of this really, really weird and really dangerous philosophy.
Yeah, and then there are people that are draining their bank accounts because they're being told, well, if you sow a seed of $100 or $500 into our ministry, then God will give you tenfold back, and and then they cherry pick a couple Bible verses to try and support that, and then you have Christians losing their homes and losing all this stuff and like ruining their families over this, and they're left wondering, like, well, God didn't fulfill His promise. Maybe that isn't true, and maybe the Bible isn't the source of all truth.
And that's ultimately where it goes. That's ultimately the direction that will take you down, because at some point you're going to hit a wall where God didn't give you what you wanted, and you're going to say, well, wait a minute. I said the right prayer. I said the right words. I visualized it. God is supposed to be bringing this to me, and He didn't, and therefore maybe there is no God. And they completely forget that very simple admonition that you you do not receive because you ask amiss. You ask after your own lusts. And that is really crucial for those people who say, how come I asked for this thing? How come I prayed for this thing and I didn't get it? Well, if you're asking after your own lusts, like if you're praying, well, Lord, I want to win the lottery because I want to buy a bunch of stuff, you're not praying according to his will.
Right.
And that is so crucial, because if you only ever ask for material things and you only ever pray for your own personal advancement and your own personal betterment, you are going to receive some disappointment.
Yeah.
Because that is not God's will. God's will for us is to, prosper us, give us a future and a hope, but that does not mean necessarily that it is going to manifest in a comfy, cozy life of riches and fame and stuff. Because what God is trying to communicate to us through the scripture is that stuff is not important. That stuff is not what it's all about. So why on earth would that be something that, God would see fit to grant us all with just because we desire it? Exactly. Some people will have, and some people will have not. And the people who have aren't, I'm not sitting here saying that there's anything inherently evil about being well-to-do or, having, means that are above some others. There's nothing inherently evil. If God has blessed you with a beautiful home and a wonderful career, and you're using your talents to get to the place where you have these things in your life, that's great. And I hope that you get on your knees every day and thank God for that blessing. And I hope that you find ways to use what you've been given to glorify God and to bless others. So I'm not saying that there's anything inherently wrong with having stuff. What I'm saying is there's something inherently wrong with believing that God has abandoned you if you don't have that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Or that like God owes us it or something.
Right.
Like we can't get the better of God. We can't paint him into a corner. Like that whole doctrine of donations and stuff that like tithing or whatever they want to call it, that where they'll say that like if you give this certain amount of money, God will return it tenfold. It's like, who are you to say what God's going to do? There is not a single Bible verse, and they always go to that Malachi thing. They always go to that where I think it's Malachi where it says something about, if you give or whatever, then see if I don't open the windows of heaven or something. Yeah. But it doesn't say anything about money or anything. Right. I mean, it doesn't say that. That's putting words in God's mouth. That's why I always, like, anytime I ever bring up anything about donations with my ministry, I'll say, like, of course we do accept donations and we're happy to accept them. God knows we could use them, but with that, if you even have to question if God's leading you, then don't give us anything. Yeah. Like I always, anytime donations come up, or the topic of donations to our ministry comes up, I always say make for absolute sure God is leading you to donate to us. If he is, then by all means go for it, but don't drain your bank account over it. I'm never ever gonna say anything like, I'm not going to make any promises that God's going to bless you in some way if you donate, because
you're not going to send him. You're not going to send him Josh Peck's miracle spring water.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Miracle prayer blanket,
prayer cloths, and yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, it's not like, I don't know what God's gonna do. He might bless somebody for that. I don't know, but I would never promise that. It's ridiculous. I don't know what God's gonna do. But the only thing that I can promise is that it'll be used for the ministry or family or whatever I say that the donations are gonna be used for. It's not gonna be squandered or anything, and that it will be greatly appreciated. That's the extent that I can promise. We're not even even 501c3, so people can't even claim it on their taxes. Any donations we get is just truly just a free gift, and I would hope that anybody donating to us doesn't expect anything in return from God, because it doesn't. They should. If people are going to donate, it should just be because they feel God calling them to do so, because we could use it. But
Right.
that doesn't mean that there's no obligation. If somebody chooses to not donate, that doesn't mean that they're any less Christian, or that they're not as spiritual or not as giving. Most people just can't, and that's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, I can't. I can't. A lot of times, I'll donate to ministries when I can, but most times I can't. I don't have the finances to do it. But in those times, then we pray, and that's why I always try to put more emphasis on the prayer than the donations, because prayer that's what will really get something done. I say God is a God of miracles. If He wants to, He could just have the money just appear, that we need, and it wouldn't even come out of anywhere. He could do that if He wanted to.
Yeah.
He doesn't need somebody to drain their bank account and sacrifice their family's grocery money or something just so we can pay our internet bill, or it's ridiculous. But there are so many churches that are going down that path nowadays, and they will even alter what they are preaching to not offend people, so they get more tithes. And I think that's why the church is in the state that it's in. They don't want to preach on anything negative or anything like prophecy or anything, anything that might rub somebody the wrong way, or something that's controversial, because God forbid they might not give as much as they would if we just give a typical, well, God loves you, kind of wishy-washy, diluted, sermon that doesn't really do any good for anybody. I mean, that's my rant for the day.
Well, for me personally, I am all about rubbing people the wrong way.
Oh, me too.
I do not avoid that. I do not have a problem with that. I do it on a regular basis. But I always think, I don't know if you can hear my cat. He's talking. But I always think that one of the biggest ways that we go wrong is right at the beginning, where we think that our definition of prosperity is the same as God's definition of prosperity, and our definition of riches is the same as His definition of riches. It's not the same. Our earthly concept of what it means to prosper and what it means to have riches and wealth is so much different than what He means by all of that. And of course, my ministry relies 100% on donations. That is how I keep the server up. That is how I put food on my own table. It's how I feed my cat. But I never promise anything in return other than my gratitude. That's all I can say. It's just thank you so much, and that's a very wonderful gesture, and it helps me a lot. That's all. And I am certain that our rewards will be in heaven, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And when I first started writing, my prayer, and it still is, my main prayer with that is that I never make a decision on what I'm going to write about based on how people are going to react, especially financially. People might not buy this book if I say this thing, even if it's the truth. I don't ever want to make a decision based on that. I just want to put out the truth, and as best as I can. I know I'm flawed and I'm human too, and I don't have perfect theology. No one does, but I don't want to just pander to what's popular at the time or what I think people will accept better. And I mean, anybody that knows my writing should know that by now. I mean, when you write a book about trying to incorporate quantum physics into the Bible, then you're definitely not trying to pander to the majority.
Well, and, in all honesty, it's like, and I always like to remind people of this fact that, I don't claim to have everything figured out, and I don't claim to have, I'm not sitting here saying that if I write something down in an article or a blog, or if I do a podcast about something, I am not proclaiming that I am right or that I have it all figured out. Here is the information as I see it now. Here's the information I've come to, through research and through prayer and through, a lot of study. But I'm also very open to being like, whoops, I was totally wrong.
Oh yeah, you have to be. If you're an honest writer, you have to be, and that's why, like in all my books, I always say, like in Disclosure, right in the beginning, I wrote that any of this is subject to change given further study and prayer and all that stuff. And there, Disclosure, I think, is still, it's still, there's a lot of good, but there's things in there, not that I necessarily, look back and say that are totally wrong, but there are things that I have different interpretations of now.
Right.
Just real minor stuff, really. It's not anything like really major, because that was a pretty cut and dry book. But and with quantum creation, I mean, all throughout that, I'm like, okay, this is speculative. I know this is speculative. This isn't, this isn't like a proclamation of the absolute truth. And because I don't know, especially when getting into things like quantum physics, there's so much that's not known. And even just an honest look at the Bible, there's so much that's not known. There's so much that we aren't told. Even just about the 33 years that Jesus was on Earth, even just that small section of time in the grand scheme of things, it's written that if everything was written that Jesus did, there wouldn't be enough books to contain it all. So
Right.
clearly there are things that we're not told, and we because of that, we kind of have to speculate, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be open to anybody else's interpretations, as long as they can line up with Scripture in some way, and not just cherry picking verses here and there and making it fit, but that actually line up. So we got to be open to that, and like we were talking about before the show started, that people get all up in arms about the silliest things, that it's speculative. And it's like, let's focus on the stuff that we should all agree on as Christians. Jesus is our Savior. I mean, look at the state of the church today because of all these silly arguments and all this division. It's ridiculous, and especially given the times that we're living in. My gosh, if there's ever been a time that the church needs to be united, it's now.
Yeah, absolutely. And and also just being forgiving towards one another if we do, say something that later turns out to be wrong or what have you. For example, I have written articles previously, and I will apply Scripture to it that I think applies to what I'm trying to say, and I will later be like, that is not what that meant at all. Like, completely applied a non-applicable piece of Scripture to this article. I am a total ding-dong. I did not interpret that in the proper context. And then I'll go back and I'll edit it or what have you. But, that happens to people all the time. And I'm a firm believer that there has to be this balance between thinking that we can figure everything out, or not everything, but thinking that we can figure things out through the right amount of rationalization, the right amount of research, and the right amount of logic. We can really figure all these things out, and I mean, that's good. That's really good. I am very, very big advocate for scholarship and for apologetics and for increasing our understanding of the Bible and what it's really trying to say. But also, I'm also a big proponent for the embracing of the concept that there are things that are shrouded in mystery. Yes. And there's a reason why there are things that people who are sincere Christians have argued about for 2,000 years. There are reasons why there is not a consensus on some issues even to this day, with all of the fantastic scholarship that has happened through the ages. we still can't come to a consensus on some things amongst sincere Christians, and that is because I believe there are some things that are just so shrouded in mystery that we just can't quite come to a place where we can understand them 100% with certainty. And so we can talk about it, we can share our ideas, we can speculate about things, but to get into these knockdown, drag-out fights over things that are not based on salvation, that are not salvational, then it's kind of fruitless.
Yeah.
Study it, come to your conclusions about it, be, open about why you believe what you believe, but also understand that if some of the greatest scholars of Christianity and biblical scholars have not been able to come to a consensus about something, then at least leave a little door open for the fact that you could be wrong. And ultimately, don't build your faith as this house of cards relying on that one specific card that if you pulled it out, the whole thing comes crumbling down. Your faith should not be based on one issue. Whether it's an issue about what you believe about the rapture, or whether it's an issue about predestination, or whether it's an issue about, any number of these sort of hot button topics. That is not what your faith should be based upon. Your faith should be based upon Jesus Christ. And we can talk about the other stuff, and it's important, but leaving that door open that you could potentially be wrong, and it shouldn't be faith destroying if someone presents you with a compelling argument that you might be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to be open to free thought in the church, and I think that's something the church is seriously lacking, and that's why we have so many denominations, Mm-hmm. I mean, denominations really show the divisions, and really, I see, every denomination is like a crack in the wall, It's just another split, another division that the church shouldn't have. We should all be one church, and we could be that if we would just allow for some free thought, and have some humility and realize. I had this is kind of a, it's a sort of good example, I guess. I had somebody ask me a little while ago, are you ever afraid, being a writer about these Christian issues and things. Actually, I think it was that atheist friend that asked me this. He asked, "Are you ever afraid that you might write something that's wrong?" And I said, "No, not really." I said, at first, when I first started writing, I kind of was scared of that. What if I write something and it turns out to be wrong later? I said, I don't really fear for that now because I pretty much know what's going to happen. It's pretty much a guarantee because I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I speculate a lot, and but there are some things that I do know, like salvation stuff and things like that. But I said no. When I write something like that, I put in there that I could be wrong, or I'll say this is speculative or something, or I make it very known that nobody should put 100% stock in this stuff, and unless they research it themselves, look into I'm a big supporter of that. That anything that I write, people should check up on me and and really compare it against the Word, because I'm flawed too, and that just comes so if I write something that turns out to be wrong, I'm not really afraid of that. And what would happen is I would if it's a really big error, then I would have to make that revision in the book and then take down the one that's up and put the new one up. But that is just a matter of a couple hours. That's not really a big deal. And then I would probably just put something on my website or something explaining it for people that have the book. But nothing really like that has happened to that extent. But if it did, in that worst case scenario, it really isn't that bad. But I find with this audience, with this I don't know, fringe Christian movement thing, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, for the most part, people are pretty accepting of that, where if a mistake comes up, they kind of know, well, all right, he's human. That's going to happen, and it doesn't like I've never heard of somebody's like in this like somebody's faith being destroyed over it, or they just like throw out Christianity altogether because of something. People seem, at least in this, which really sets it apart from the rest of the church, and which is why I love it so much. People have a lot more humility about it in this fringe Christian thing, and they realize that some people do get all up in arms about dumb things like that. That even in this, that happens. But a lot of times, more in this than anywhere else I've ever personally experienced or seen, people are more open to other interpretations and ways of looking at things, just in a general sense, which is what I really like. And I really wish the rest of the church could be like that, at least a little bit more, so we could get it together and really focus on what's important, and that's preaching the gospel. But instead, we want to fight about the rapture or the age of the earth, and we want to call people the heretics and tell people they're not a Christian if they don't believe in a young earth or something stupid like that. And not saying that young earth is stupid, because I do believe in young earth, but just fighting about it is stupid. But so that's my second rant. That's my second rant for the day.
Well, and here's what it comes down to for me personally, is that I'm very open and upfront with the fact that I probably have said some pretty boneheaded things. Maybe in my own show, maybe on my podcast, maybe on my website, maybe in this episode, as during this interview, I might have said something where I will go back and be like, what was I talking about? I am very open and upfront with the fact that I am not one of these people, you probably noticed even in this interview, I do my best to paraphrase scripture, but I don't have this giant, scripture bubble that floats around over my head that I can just pick, the right things out. I do my best. I am not.
Same here.
I am not like some people. I am not fluent in Christianese. I am not one of those people that has these phrases that all of the mainstream Christians use that I inject into my words, into my speech, so that I sound more Christian.
Exactly.
I sometimes wonder, am I too silly? Am I too simple? But at the end of the day, all I can be is who I am, and all I can go on is the knowledge that I've gleaned from the studies that I've done, and with the leading of the Holy Spirit, and working as best as I can to understand the information that's put before me and take it and filter it all through a biblical and scriptural lens. And sometimes I will fail at that. But you know what? I am not going to present myself as the final authority on anything, nor should anyone, because at the end of the day, none of us are.
Exactly.
So maybe people just need to relax a little bit,
Yes.
just if people are just open and honest about who they are and how they perceive the world, and how, like I've said many times, our testimonies are sometimes our best witness. We could just tell people, what God has done in our lives, and be open and honest about where our failings are, where we lack. If I am speaking to a non-believer, I will always be very, very open about the ways in which I am flawed.
Me too.
It is vast. There's an endless supply of anecdotes about how flawed I am, and not even just how flawed I was, how flawed I am.
Yes.
And if you can just say to someone, look, this is me, this is how I fail, this is how I am a terrible person sometimes, here are the things that I continue to not get a grasp on. For example, a huge part of my testimony is about overcoming anxiety. And I never want people to take from that now I am 100% free from anxiety, and I never get worried, and I never get anxious. I still struggle with it. You know why? Because now I recognize it as a spiritual battle.
Yeah.
I recognize that this crippling anxiety that I used to suffer, to where it would paralyze me and it would make me think I was going to die, that was spiritual oppression. That was something that I was battling, something that I did not understand. And the wonderful thing now is that I have tools in my arsenal to come against those things when they come upon me, but that does not mean that I am immune to it. I still struggle with anxiety to this day. I am an anxious person. I am a worrier. But now I can go to be anxious for nothing, and I can remember that wonderful scripture that the Lord put in front of my face, that that one section of Philippians tells me everything I need to know. First, it tells me, settle down, quit worrying, quit being anxious. That's the first part. And then it tells me that in all things, in everything, as long as I pray, and then I tell the Lord what I need, and then I approach Him with thanksgiving, then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will comfort me in Christ Jesus. Isn't that amazing? That one little section of Scripture tells me to this day everything I need to know. It never tells me that I will never experience anxiety. It tells me that when I am anxious, I don't need to be, and here are the tools to come against it.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating, and that's just what I love so much about God. It's just how honest He is. You know?
Right.
Like, it sounds like a simple thing to say, well, obviously God's honest, but when you actually experience it like that, you know, He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He tells us, you're going to go through some stuff, but I'm going to be there with you, and we'll get through this together.
Right.
I just love that. You've talked a little bit about your website and your show and things that you write about, but well you mentioned them, but give us like a good like overview. Like, tell us all about your website. What is your show? What do you write about? Just tell us all of it.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, you know, I started my website before I was even a Christian. I started it as a place to just explore all of these weird things that I was interested in, whether it was New Age philosophy, whether it was the occult, whether it was the unexplained, paranormal, supernatural, all that jazz, conspiracy theories, anything that kind of fell under the umbrella of extraordinary is what I would write about. And so I named my site Extraordinary Intelligence, not as a commentary on how smart I am, which some people think is what I mean, but actually Extraordinary Intelligence is a reference to outside of the ordinary information, intelligence as in intel. So that's where the name of the site came from. And once I became a Christian, I changed the approach and the worldview, of course, that I now espoused, changed the things that I wrote about, but I kept the site intact with all of its archives of what I had written before, because I really wanted people to see the evolution of where I had started to where I am now. But now everything that I write about is through a biblical worldview, and the way I like to describe it is that I went from exploring the New Age to where now I expose it. And I still talk about all kinds of weird and wonderful, wacky things, but everything I write about is through a biblical lens and through a Christian worldview. I write a lot of articles. I write much like I speak. I'm very long-winded, and so I write kind of the same way. My articles can be long, but they're always full of, you know, I cite my sources, and I explore a lot of things about cults and different New Age practices, whether it is inside or outside the mainstream Christian church. And then, I think it's maybe been a year and a half ago now, I decided to start a podcast. And the podcast is called Beyond Extraordinary. So get it? The website Extraordinary Intelligence. The podcast is beyond extraordinary.
Ah.
It's a new, a branch of the extraordinary brand. So the podcast Beyond Extraordinary is a place where I just, in a lot of my episodes, I interview different people who I feel might have something to contribute to my audience. I don't always. Most of the people I interview are Christians, but sometimes I will interview people who are not if I believe that they have a story to share that might be of benefit, either on a knowledge level or on a cautionary level.
Yeah.
And some episodes I just do by myself, and it'll just be very topic based. It's something I really have come to enjoy. I really, really like podcasting. It's become quite the focus of my ministry, and I am just so blessed that people, for whatever reason, like to listen to it. I'm really confused and blessed by that. But I love it, and it's been a lot of fun, and God willing, I can continue to do that for, into the future. It's been pretty neat, pretty awesome. I've gotten to network with some really cool people, and so all of that is under the umbrella of extraordinaryintelligence.com. The link to the podcast is right there on the extraordinaryintelligence.com website. So it's all kind of together in a neat little package, and you can access everything that I write and all of the shows that I do right there through the website. And I am, I think it's been such a blessing in my life, because a large part of what I do, I have such a heart for people who are lost. It's something that the Lord has really put on me, and probably because it's like I've been there, and I know what it feels like, and so it's amazing the way the Lord works, because since I started this website previous to becoming a Christian and had a level of success with it, I've managed to hang on to a fair portion of the audience that was with me prior to my becoming a Christian. So
Oh, wow.
I have a pretty good portion of my audience that continues to be either non-believing or seeking or still a little confused or whatever, and my heart is really for them. And so a lot of times you will see my approach in my writing and in my podcast kind of seems like it's a little more geared towards people who aren't 100% Christian minded or not 100% ready to surrender. I try to speak to them, and I try to, I've written articles. I wrote one article that was called "I've Been There, My Message to Non-Believers," and that was just my whole sort of manifesto about why it is that I do what I do, because it's just on my heart. So the Lord gave me this platform, unbeknownst to me, that it was going to be set up in such a way that someday it was going to be used to reach these people who are now where I was then. And so, of course now a very, very big portion of my audience is fellow believers, and I am grateful for all of them, and I am so blessed. And again, sometimes I wonder, I don't know why they listen to me. They're probably all smarter than me. But I do have that special emphasis on reaching people who are stuck in that New Age paradigm, who are stuck in occultism, or who are stuck in this sort of in-between place where they're searching but they don't know what they're searching for. It's my prayer that I can help lead them to the truth. So that is largely what I do on extraordinaryintelligence.com.
Oh, that's awesome, and you really are doing phenomenal work over there. And I love what you do, and I can relate to you with the podcasting thing, because I love it now. But when I first started, or actually, before I fought it so hard. I did not want to start a podcast. That was the last thing that I wanted to do. Because, and well, actually, the first person that ever even brought it up was the atheist friend that I keep bringing up. He said, you should try podcasting, and of course he wanted me to do it about like different things than Christianity. But of course, me being me, I thought, well, if I was ever going to do one, it'd be about the Bible. But I just didn't think that I would be able to keep up like a weekly podcast, or I just didn't think I'd be able to do it. I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't have any kind of speaking expertise or anything, and I really just didn't have an interest in it. And then this guy got a hold of me on Facebook. He saw a post that I made. I think it was something about prophecy or something. I don't remember the post exactly, but a guy named Paul Kennedy got a hold of me. It was the first time I met him, and he stayed in touch with me, and he was the one that actually convinced me to just try it out, and I did. And after, like, I said, well, I'll try just doing, because this was like right after Disclosure came out, and I said, well, I'll just try doing like a short series like on my book or something and just see how it goes. So that way, if I don't like it, I don't have to keep doing it, but then I still have something that would be kind of cool. So I did that, and halfway through that series, Doug Woodward wrote just an amazing article about defending, not necessarily defending the Nephilim belief, but defending the right to have a belief of the Nephilim, and just how it was a ridiculous thing to be divided against, because he was dealing with some flack, and so were some of the other people dealing with some flack from people about even just believing that Genesis 6 could be a literal thing. And I thought that was so well done that I decided to just do a show on that right in the middle of the series. So that was really the first show that I did that was on a topic outside of myself, and that was really when I fell in love with it. I was like, I really like podcasting, and so I kept up with it, and this will be episode 57, I believe. So and it's been every week. I haven't missed a week, so it's been over a year now, and it's been a blast.
Well, you're a lot more of a go-getter than me, because in all honesty, when I first started, I thought, I can knock one of these suckers out every week, and I just never ever, I did one episode, and then episode 2 came out 3 weeks later, and to this day, I cannot seem to do more than 2 episodes a month, maybe 3 on a good month. But so I think I started my podcast before you, and I'm so far behind you. I think I just did episode 30. So, but
Well, just so you know, it definitely is a competition. This is a race, and I am winning. So. No, actually, there are times that I wish I would. There are times that. There are weeks, because it can be kind of stressful sometimes when I don't have a show prepared, or I gotta figure something out. There are times that I wish when I started I wouldn't have made it okay, this is going to be a weekly thing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish I would. Well, there are times that I kind of wish I would have taken your approach, where I can just put one out when I have one. That would be nice. But luckily, God's always come through. Actually, because of the conference and just everything that's been going on, I haven't really. For this week, I didn't have any time to get anything together. So I was like, well, shoot, I wonder. Maybe Natalina will come on, because I know her already, and I know that we can talk and make a really good show, and I don't have to do too much prep, and that would be great. And then luckily you were available, so there have been weeks like that. But God's always come through, and even if I can't find a guest, I do. Sometimes I do. Just me talking about whatever, and that. So it seemed to work out, but yeah, there are times that I kind of wish maybe I shouldn't have made it a weekly thing. But God's been gracious and has always come through. So I've been able to put one out every week despite what's going on at the time. So it's been good.
When I recorded my first podcast, God said to me, I know how you are, and you should just not set the expectations too high, and you should just say right off the bat that this is going to be, on a semi-regular basis. And even if I say semi-regular basis, that's being very generous to myself. But and part of it is because I am just so, I'm just so weird about, I've gotten into this thing where I like to put the different sound effects into it, and I get all this crazy ideas about the different things I want to put into the show and stuff like that. So I'll sit on it forever, and so sometimes I'll have an interview recorded, but then I'm sitting on it for 2 weeks. It's weird. It's welcome to my messy mind, my neurosis, whatever. But it so far so good. I'll just say it like that. It comes out when you get a show, when I get a show.
Exactly. And it builds anticipation. And, I think that's so cool, too, like that, and because I know Gons and Basil at Canary Cry, they do that, too, where they edit it like that, and that's my one saving grace, and the only reason I can do it every week is I don't do much editing at all, because I don't have time. But if I had it if I had it where it wasn't every week, I'd be able to do a lot more of that stuff. I think that's so cool that you add in those little things in there that really help the progression of the show, and I think I would be surprised if anybody were to ever complain that you don't have a weekly show. It'd be ridiculous. It's part of what makes your show your show.
It's just I keep the Natalina stamp on everything I do, and sometimes you just gotta wait, because part of the way I operate is that I have a problem with, I'll just admit it, I have a problem with prioritizing. So I'll have a million different projects that I need to do, that I want to do, and then I get overwhelmed by all of these projects, and so then I will pick, none of the above. I'm going to go do this instead. And
I have just had it. I'll go watch TV or something. All that stuff. I'm kind of like that too. When it's too much, then I don't want to do any of it.
I know. I have a really hard time with making decisions. It's just part of the way I operate. But hopefully once I finally knuckle down and get a show out, it is decent, I guess. But it's a lot of fun. I've really come to enjoy it. It was, the first couple episodes were like, ooh, I can't even go back and listen to my first couple episodes because I just get embarrassed. I'm like, what am I doing? But, once you hit your stride and you kind of, realize that, number one for me was that I didn't know how my personality was going to translate in podcast form, because I do have sort of this outspoken sort of, I can be a little sassy. I have I just have this sort of personality that maybe isn't for everyone. And so I wondered how it would come across in podcast form, if people would think I was too silly, if people would think that whatever. But and I mean, I break into song on my podcasts. But once I got to the point where I was like, what, the self-editing will kill it. Just go with the flow, be yourself, and people will hear it and appreciate that you're just being true to who you are, and that you're open enough to let them get to know your personality without feeling like you have to put on a front or be a character or, try to be this professional broadcast voice person or whatever. I just start my shows just being me, and I maybe I'm not for everyone, but at least at the end of the day, and I know it's the same with you, at the end of the day, you know that you just presented yourself as you are, and there was no front, and there was no act, there was no false persona. It's just me talking. If you like it, great. And if not, there are some other wonderful quality podcasts in this niche that I would urge you to check out. So
Yeah.
I just do me, and I've been blessed beyond measure that I have been able to keep this going, and that there are people out there who want to listen. So it's been really, really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I handle mine the same way. Like because at first I was when I first started, I was thinking, and people can go back. I have it all, on YouTube and in the archives and stuff. Like my first episodes, they're all up there. When I first did my first episode and I listened to it, I'm like, ugh, I should really edit out all my stutters and all my ums and uhs. And then I thought, if I do that, that is going to be hours of editing.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll just put it out there. We'll just see, and if I get a bunch of people that complain about it, then I just won't do this anymore. But I've only had the only actual complaints that I've ever got about that were from people who were mad about something else, and then they were just using that to support it. I've never had like a legitimate complaint about you stutter too much, or you really got to watch those ums and uhs. I've never gotten that. Like I think people really appreciate just the. I try to be genuine. Because this is how I talk in normal.
Yeah.
Like even when I'm talking to my wife or my kids, this is how I talk.
Well, people can tell when you're being phony baloney, and people pick up on that. And I would rather have someone say to me, when you're, for example, like with singing, it happens to me all the time. It's just how I talk. It's how I communicate. I will be, maybe one day I will say, "Welcome to Beyond Extraordinary," and one episode it'll be, "Welcome to Beyond Extraordinary." It just happens. I'll be like, "I've got a really great show for you today." It's my personality. It just comes bubbling out. And so, I would rather have somebody write me an email and say, "You and your singing are so annoying." I would rather have that than have someone write to me and say, "You are so fake. Your personality is so phony. I don't believe you." I'd rather have somebody dislike me. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Now that I think about it.
Well, you could always just tell them, "Hey, I suffer from a medical condition called Oprah syndrome."
Oh, Lord. I would have to see a doctor. It's one of those things where it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if something about my personality or the way I communicate or the way that I do my show bothers people, then at least I can say, well, that was just me being me, and they just don't like me.
Yeah.
But I would rather have that than have someone say, "You sound so phony, you sound so fake, you sound, you're you're trying to sound smarter than you are, or more professional than you are." And it's just, you just put yourself out there. And then also you don't set this false precedent. If you start out by trying to sound like a news broadcaster, and then maybe 10 episodes in you drop that, then people can't decide which is the real you. It's better off to just be you, for warts and all, and let people just take it as it is. And I think people really appreciate that, and they really respond well to it, because I like to think when people are listening to my show, it's more like just talking to a friend, than being talked at.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how I try to handle my show too. And I mean, pretty much I think every guest I've ever had on has been like that. It's more like having a conversation about interesting things than, all right, well, what's on the curriculum for today, you know?
Oh, I try really, really hard. Like, I really try to have an outline or, some sort of a plan for each
Oh
show.
yeah, yeah.
And it never works. Like, I'll have like a Word document open and I'll have all of these things that I want to hit. And by 3 minutes into a show, I guarantee you I am off script. I am not asking the questions I intended to. I am, I will have an introduction set, and I will usually stay pretty close to that. But the minute I launch into the interview, it's, the wheels come off. It's just all improv because that's how conversations are.
Exactly.
I have certain points that I want to hit, and I try to hit those. But if I was trying to go off of a transcript or a script of some sort, I would just fail every time because, it doesn't feel as natural.
Exactly, and a lot of times too, because I always try to write questions beforehand, and that's more of just kind of like a loose guide. Like,
Yeah.
Most of this conversation that we've been having is not at all on what I have in my open Word document. But and a lot of times
That's because I'm just all over the place. I am.
well,
You have me on a show. Good luck trying to stick to your list of questions because Natalina's going to take you in some circles.
Well, that's good. That's good though. That's good because I think that stuff is more Holy Spirit driven anyway than because like a lot of times when I have guests on, they will inadvertently answer questions that I'm going to ask later,
Yeah.
but that happens all the time.
All the time.
And so I've just kind of learned to have, I have the questions there, but I don't stick to it. I don't like. I use it kind of as just a guide for the show or points I want to hit or whatever. But if I don't get to all of them, it's not a problem. That's actually more often than not, that's a good thing. And because if I don't get to all of them, then that's usually because the conversation is going somewhere else that it really needed to go. Like this show was. Originally, and I say originally intended, but it's not like it's never a concrete thing. Was originally intended to be talking just about the New Age stuff, but look at all the other points that we hit.
Right.
That wasn't planned. That just came up, but they're all really important points that, for whatever his reasons are, God wanted them to be brought up, so they were. So yeah. I like having some of that spontaneity.
Yeah, it's important, and it just gives everything a more organic feel. And like I said, I generally have a vague outline of what I want to talk about, but you also have to just let the Lord lead, and if He takes you off in a tangent, then you just follow that rabbit trail and see where it takes you, and just trust that maybe there's someone out there listening who needed to hear that, and it always works out, and it's always, but sometimes I wish that I was a little bit better at staying on script, because I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I have, here's a little insider podcasting talk, but I have had situations where I'm interviewing someone, and I won't tell anyone who it is, but I've had situations where I've been interviewing a person, and we get through the things that I want to talk about so quickly.
Oh yeah.
That I am all of a sudden just like, I don't know where to go from there. So I just go into like nervous blabbering on about random things and hope that the guest picks up on something and takes it and runs with it. Because so I'm like, maybe if I had planned this out a little bit better, I would have known where to go. But it's funny how it always works out. I'll have that brief moment of panic where I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't plan for this. Now where do we go? but it's thus far, it has always worked out to, successfully route into a different conversation. So, you just gotta let it go where it leads, like I said, just like it's conversation with anybody. And sometimes a conversation has a natural end, and then you just end the show.
Yeah,
Feel it.
absolutely. And I mean, I've had a lot of shows like that too, where I'll burn through the questions, and then it's like, okay, do I want to put out a 20-minute episode, or should I just try to think of some stuff? And but yeah, there's always like just that brief moment of panic, but
Mhm.
after that, it just works out, and so
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, before I forget, because I know I'm
Yeah.
going to forget to ask, tell us about your boutique.
Ooh. Well, I essentially have a lot of like artistic extra energy that I need to burn. And one way that it manifests is that I have this love for creating jewelry. And so, because, like I said, the podcast, the website, and that type of thing, it is what I do. It's my job. It's my primary, you know, focus. I had to, find a different way to supplement my income. So, I was always making jewelry just for myself and for friends and for gifts and stuff. But I thought, maybe I could open up a little boutique and see if anybody else would be interested in it. So I take all of my handmade jewelry. I do a lot of wire wrapping, and I try to make everything by hand. I use a lot of semi-precious stones, and I make jewelry. A lot of it is very faith-based, a lot of it's just for fun. It's just, I kind of have a little bit of a bohemian style with it when it comes to that. And I have a website called extraordinaryboutique.com. See what I did there? I kept the extraordinary in the family. um, it's called extraordinaryboutique.com, and that's where I list my items, my handcrafted jewelry that I make, and sell it. And so far, I've had a great amount of success with that. It is humbling when you make something with your own hands and somebody else actually wants it. And so right now, I have been working very diligently to get a whole new set of jewelry made to put up on the website, which will be coming within the next few days. I've got a whole bunch of new pieces because I sold out a lot of what was on there. There's not a ton of stuff on there right now, but I am going to be listing a bunch of new stuff that I think people are really going to like, and it's just kind of like another one of those passions of mine, and a creative outlet for me. My first love, I'll tell you, my first love, as much as I enjoy the podcasting, my first love is writing.
Yeah.
I am a writer at heart. I love words. It is my number one creative outlet. And then I have my music. I love to sing, as I've already demonstrated, and I love, I play the violin and the viola. I love to express myself that way. But the boutique is a way that I can make something, that just really satisfying feeling of making something with your hands, and then if people like it and they want to help support my ministry, that's one way that they can do it and get something in return. So I've got that linked up on my website as well, extraordinaryboutique.com.
That is awesome, and yeah, and I've seen it, and it's, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about jewelry, but I've seen, I have a wife and a daughter, so I've seen a lot of handmade, I've seen a lot of handmade jewelry and stuff, but I've never seen anything like what you make.
Oh, thank you.
It's amazing, and for people who are listening, Christmas is coming up.
That's right. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get some stuff out there that people can, get their hands on for gifts or what have you. And I try to make everything with really high quality beads and wire and all of that kind of stuff. It's all like I said, a lot of semi-precious stones. I love using natural elements and natural stones. And it's not just beads on a string. I try to make things that are going to be 100% unique, and if people like it, then that gives me a warm fuzzy.
To quote Michael Heiser. And it's great too because it's affordable, which is nice.
Well, it's one of those things where it's really hard to put a price on something like that. It's really difficult, to evaluate your own work. And so and some people don't like it. Some people say, well, I could go to Claire's boutique in the mall and buy something for $5, and and I say, yes, you absolutely can, but it's going to be a mass-produced item that was probably made using child labor,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything that I make is 100% one of a kind. If you buy a necklace or a bracelet or whatever from me, you will be the only person in the world who has that piece. And as it usually one necklace, it'll sometimes take me several days to put it together. So essentially the way I figure out my pricing is, I take the cost of the materials and then I factor in how long it took me to make it, and that's where I come up with my pricing. And so I think that it's generally priced under what you would pay like at a department store. But it's a little bit more than you would pay at like a discount store. We'll put it that way. So
Right. Yeah. For the level of work that goes into it, though, it's definitely worth it.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't get to talk about my jewelry all that often, so that's nice of you to bring that up.
Oh yeah. Well, absolutely. You do good work, and yeah. If I know we went through your websites and everything before, but just so it's all in one show, if people want to know more about you or your work or get a hold of you, or how can they where can they go? How can they go about that?
Well, everything is kind of centralized in my website. That's extraordinaryintelligence.com. You can access all of my articles and my archives through that website. Also at extraordinaryintelligence.com, you'll find links to all of my shows. You will find links to links to my Twitter, Pinterest, all of the different ways that I socialize that I socially engage in the media, social media.
That right there was the most eloquent and articulate thing I've ever heard in my life.
I think we can safely call that a brain fart. I think we can say. I don't know if there is a better term for what just happened.
That is the perfect definition.
You can find links to all my stuff. All of the different things that I do on the internet are all at extraordinaryintelligence.com. We'll just say it like that.
Awesome.
And if anyone needs to reach me, there is a contact form on the site too, and I try to respond to my emails. Some fall through the cracks, I will admit, but I try to respond to everything. And so if you have any, guest suggestions or questions about anything I've written, or if you just want to ask me to give you a reason for the hope that is in me, you just email me and I will do my best to get back to you.
Awesome, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's one thing I try to do too, is stay in contact as much as possible. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about before we close out the show?
Well, I think we covered a lot of bases. I think we covered more bases than we even thought we were going to cover.
Yes, indeed.
But I guess just in closing, I would just say to everyone, thank you so much for listening. And if there's anyone out there listening who does not know Jesus Christ, then I ask that you would just come to, get on your knees, go to the Lord, and ask Him to reveal Himself to you, and tell Him that you want to know Him and that you need help and that you cannot do it on your own, and He will show Himself to you, and He will change your life. And if you want someone to help you navigate your way through how to do that, if you have questions or whatever, contact Josh, contact me, and we'll be happy to help you with anything that we possibly can. Pray with you, whatever you need.
Absolutely.
That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Amen. Oh, well, thank you so much. It looks like we're all about all out of time, but I do want to I do want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experience and your extraordinary intelligence with us. See what I did there? uh, oh, that Oprah syndrome is coming up again. This has been an absolute pleasure, honor, and blessing. I'd love to have you back on again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Anytime, Josh.
Awesome. All right. Well, again, that was Natalina from Extraordinary Intelligence. Make sure to check out her website, extraordinaryintelligence.com, her podcast, Beyond Extraordinary, and her handmade jewelry at the Extraordinary Boutique. I highly recommend all of her work, everything she does. And if you are a fan of this show and my writing, I guarantee you'll be a fan of hers as well. All that being said, you have been listening to The Sharpening, and I am your host, Josh Peck. Until next time, take care, and God bless.